Due to my strange occupation, I spent most of my time traveling and meeting new people. Most forget about our trivial meetings, but some linger, sensing that they can trust me with some story that they would like to get off their chest. A story they cannot tell anyone else. A story that haunts them or one that they wish to forget. I collect these stories as I travel for work. I am unaware what qualities I hold that make other people feel at ease enough to spill their soul to a stranger. Perhaps they can sense that no matter how outlandish the tale, I'll believe them. The other day, I literally bumped into a woman coming out of a corner store. She dropped her drink, and when I collected it to return it to her, she stared at me. I knew in that moment she could sense that I was a person that she could unload an experience that had been troubling her. Unfortunately, I could not stick around and hear it. I was in a hurry, and that was the reason why I ran directly into her in the first place. But I gave her my business card to call me later that night or the following day. I do not make a habit of giving out my number to people who only want to give me tales and not work. But for her, I made a quick exception. She did call me later that night, and I had time to hear what had been troubling her for over a year. With her permission, she allowed me to write down her story. I of course changed the names and made the locations as vague as possible for her sake. I tried to keep this in her words as much as possible. I only thought to write this down after I had heard it, so I may have forgotten every word spoke, but it should be very close to what had been said. I think she was relieved that somebody believed what she had said, and it does not matter to me if you believe this tale or not. This is simply just what I heard that night. A year ago, maybe more, I had been proposed to by my high school sweetheart. He had been the only person that I had ever dated, and I wasn't aware of any warning signs that started to appear in our relationship. In my defense, they weren't very big warning signs either. Things I could easily ignore or sweep under the rug, believing that because we loved each other, everything was going to be fine. Bill would stay out some nights, which I assumed he took extra hours at his job, and crashed at a friend's place. He spent a bit too much money on booze most weekends, or for takeout when we just barely were paying our rent. When he did propose, he bought the cheapest ring, which I was fine with, but his mother had asked what happened to the ring that belonged to his grandmother that he had been given when she had passed away. His excuse was that he had it in a safe. It was a very expensive ring, and he didn't want to risk it getting lost. Again, in his defense, I had a bad habit of losing earrings and misplacing my keys every so often. I agreed with him about the ring being in a safe spot. We could hand it down to our children when the time come. But he didn't sound very happy over the children idea. When the subject came up, he always found a way to make me drop it. Planning weddings are stressful, anyone can tell you that. I had friends he hated and didn't want to come, and I thought some of his friends were a bad influence. I didn't care about him drinking with them, but I heard rumors that the group of friends had started to deal drugs during those parties, and I didn't want Bill anywhere near something like that. Let alone the risk of having the cops called at our wedding, because his friends had decided to deal out of the bathrooms or something like that. After we had started to disagree on one thing for the wedding, we found ourselves disagreeing about nearly everything. I found it much easier to just go along with what he wanted instead of arguing. The last day that I spent with Bill was when he had driven to where we wanted our reception to be held. I found the location just fine. It was a beautiful apple orchard. A strange location for us though. We were both city folk, but his uncle had owned the orchard. We could have our reception there for cheap, and it was a great location. Aside from how far of the drive it was really perfect. I had thought that we could go one day without having some sort of disagreement about the wedding, but I was mistaken. On the drive home, the topic of who to invite came up again. It was the biggest fight that we had. I never raised my voice, but I was so adamant about his group of friends not coming that I found myself red in the face yelling right back at him, pleading for him to understand. Everything that we had ever argued about came out then. On a dark highway with no other cars surrounded by trees, he silenced me by spitting out every hateful thing that he had been holding back and letting fester. I had never been so deeply cut by somebody's words before. I never knew that he had been angry over how he felt I apparently was pressing him for children, or how I had let myself go after high school, or how I burdened him forcing him to work so often, even though I worked 2 part-time jobs trying to support us. And after months of looking, I couldn't find any better paying places that were hiring. Every statement was a dagger stabbing into my heart. Everything that was wrong in our lives, he had put the blame on me. I think it was because it was so much easier for him to blame than face his own mistakes and his shortcomings. And because of his tirade, I had started to cry, a wailing kind of cry that I just couldn't hold back. The stress of the past few months had finally came to the surface. Bill did something that I never expected from him. With one hand on the wheel, he hit me with the other so hard that I bounced my head against my window. The shock and pain made me stop crying. Once I fully realized what had happened, I felt the urge to sob even harder bubble up inside me, but I forced it down out of the fear of him hitting me again. "We shouldn't be together," I said softly, but I knew that he heard it. He stayed silent with a calm rage on his face, an expression to this day that still gives me chills thinking about. I'm positive that he was planning on killing me in that moment. I don't know what happened that made him hate me so much. I kept my eyes on him as my body shook. On the dark road before us was empty of cars, but at the last moment I saw it. A deer. It had walked out onto the road that our headlights were illuminating. Bill had time to drive into the other lane. If we were lucky, the deer would run to the left and we could avoid it. And it did run to the left. But Bill purposely swerved to hit the poor creature. My head bounced off the dashboard, causing me to see stars and black out for a few moments. The deer crashed and went over our car, cracking our windshield and denting the front, but it didn't do too much damage otherwise. I have no idea why our airbags didn't go off. Bill screeched to a stop at the side of the road, swearing up a storm. We both sat breathing heavy, trying to process what had just happened. Bill had tried to kill both of us. We knew, but neither would say it out loud. Once I was seeing straight again, I scrambled out of the car. I don't know if it was to get away from Bill or if it was to check on the deer. My forehead was bleeding from how hard that I had hit it, but I ignored it. The poor deer was in the middle of the road, broken and twisted, but it was twitching and still alive. I limped over to it. My seatbelt dug into my body when we had hit the poor creature. My pain was nothing compared to the deer. I knew that I couldn't do anything for it, but I still felt the need to be beside it. I sat on my knees beside the deer, its big eyes looking up at me, its ears moving, but because its neck was broken, it couldn't move anything else. I wanted to cry for it. I felt like it was my fault that it had been hit. If I hadn't agreed to marry Bill, we wouldn't have been driving on this road at this time and it would be safe. I silently said an apology to it, petting its head softly not to harm or panic it any further. And Bill was coming towards us. He was openly threatening to kill me if I didn't get back into the car. He looked furious. I knew that he would hurt me, but I stayed by the deer. I needed to be beside it while it died. It was my fault after all. I felt the tears coming back to my eyes, causing my vision to blur as I watched Bill stride ever closer in the red light that the car's rear lights gave off. I thought my only hope to live through the night was the chance if another car came down the road and it saw our car pulled over and myself and the deer in the middle of the road. But I was wrong. A wind blew through the forest surrounding us, and at first, I thought the movement in the trees across the road was just that, trees blowing through the wind. I heard a sound that was very much like the branches hitting each other in a strong breeze, but it sounded off somehow. That strange sound made me look up and over, and then up some more. My mind didn't piece together what I was seeing at first. It looked like some tree branches were rising above the others, but the branches were too big to be a part of any tree that I had ever seen. It was only when I saw the rest of the figure's head I knew what I was looking at. Towering over the dark trees and silhouetted against the moon was a deer head. Large antlers were what I saw rising up at first. It was so dark that I only saw the shape of it. Even Bill stopped when he followed my line of sight. That head was too large, too impossibly large. It had to be a trick of the night or something else. No deer could be taller than the trees. And then the deer figure opened its eyes. Countless eyes made of silver lights, all different shapes and sizes, all looking down at us. Eyes made of moonlight covering its entire dark head. I should have been frightened. Such a thing couldn't be real, and yet we were both seeing it. And yet, strangely, I was in awe of the creature. The creature raised its head even more, the strange groaning noise coming with it. It then made a noise so loud that it shook my entire body. I thought my eardrums would burst from the sound. My bones creaked under the weight of such a noise. I'm not a religious person, but I do think this is what the trumpet that sounded the end of days would be like. Bill dropped to his knees, holding his ears and doing his best to drown the horrible sound out. Even after it ended, neither of us recovered for a few minutes. While we were reeling, eyes started to appear in the woods around us, eyes closer to our level. Unable to move, I saw countless deer start slowly coming out of the woods and into the moonlight. But there was something wrong with these deer. All of them were dead, their eyes a glowing milky white, their bodies twisted and rotting. Some had to drag their broken limbs behind. One dragged itself forward with only one working front leg. I could smell them, the horrible smell of death. And Bill saw them starting to surround us and stood on shaking legs. He took a few rough steps towards the car, leaving me behind. He got a few steps from the car before the first deer darted out towards them. It was a female, and it rammed him so hard that he flew a few feet closer back to me. In a blind panic, he got up, his eyes wide and white with fear. He tried running again, only to have a buck come charging at him, antlers only grazing him but ripping his shirt. Soon Bill was being shoved painfully from deer to deer, some using their hard hooves to knock him aside into the next creature. He finally went down when a hoof caught his jaw, breaking it and knocking teeth from his mouth. He screamed in pain, blood pouring onto the road. The deer stared down at him in a tight circle with their white eyes emotionless. The massive creature in the forest didn't move. It too watched the gruesome scene play out. I couldn't do anything, I couldn't move. I couldn't try and save him. At some point, I had loved that man, but right then, I felt nothing for him as he begged for his life through blood and shattered teeth. He tried crawling away but was quickly stopped by a deer slamming down on his legs and crushing bone. The deer that we had hit had died in front of me. I knew that it was dead, and yet it still stood. Its neck twisted, it started to weakly walk towards Bill. I heard each step getting closer to him. Hooves on the road was the only sound as the rest of the dead deer paused and watched their new member get closer and closer to the one who had killed it. When it reached Bill, he had been able to crawl to nearly the end of the road, leaving a trail of blood behind him. With a great deal of pain, he rolled onto his back to stare up at the creature that stopped right behind him. They both stared at each other, Bill babbling nonsense and spitting blood. The deer did not listen. It did not care for his pleas. It reared up on its hind legs and brought down its front hooves down onto Bill's face. I wanted to look away, and like I said, I had loved this man at one time. Even after everything he had said and done, I felt like I should at least make myself watch his end. I watched as the deer with its broken neck and head swinging wildly bring down its front legs again and again. I heard the impact of the hit onto Bill's skull and his head cracking open. I heard how he tried to scream, only to be cut short. And when Bill's skull was nothing but a mashed pile, the deer finally stopped. I was positive that it was my turn next, but the creatures just left. They all dragged their dead bodies back into the woods where they came from. And before I could question anything, I heard that bone-crushing trumpet sound from the massive creature still watching. The sound and pressure were so intense that I blacked out after a few seconds. When I came to, I found myself in the back of an ambulance. I saw flashing lights and smelled burnt plastic and metal. A man I never met before kept telling me everything would be alright and that I was safe to rest. I was so tired. When I woke the second time, I was in a hospital bed. According to what the police had pieced together, Bill and I had gotten into a fight. He dropped me off on the side of the road before speeding off. A truck driver had seen me get kicked out of the car and with a banged-up head. He was going to pull over to see if I was alright when a deer jumped in front of Bill's car. He was still in view, so the truck driver saw the car crash and it catching on fire. However, they never found the deer's body. They had all assumed I was in shock from seeing Bill's death, that they accepted my silent act. I simply nodded and agreed about what events I had been told happened. I had no memories of what I had been told, so it must have been what happened, right? There's no way that dead deer came out of the woods to kill Bill because he was an idiot that killed one of them on purpose. But deep down, I can't shake that memory. It was so real. After they spoke to the truck driver, they never found him again. He had given them a fake name, so I was never able to thank him. The chilling part was the only found body parts of Bill's body. They couldn't explain why only some of his body had burned so thoroughly while others did not, but they still marked the case as closed. I was ready to accept that the whole thing was a stress-induced nightmare. After I had returned from the hospital, I had a dream that I was in the forest surrounded by those dead deer, their dead eyes staring me down. I cried for them. When I woke up at the foot of my bed, there was something that had not been there before, a single antler. I don't know if that was a warning or a thank you, but I kept it. I asked an artist friend to carve something out of the antler to make use of it, and I wear a small pendant from it every day. I may have been saved that night, but I fear what saved me is fickle. The next person might not be so lucky. Whoever meets those creatures may be taken, so take care to notice the deer crossing signs, be careful on the roads at nighttime, and I hope if you do hit a deer, it forgives you. That was mostly what the woman told me. I thanked her for her story. I doubt that she'll ever call me again. Hopefully this helps her move on. I may drop by again with some other stories. I've recently been hearing about this strange person people are calling a half-blood cryptid. I'm very busy with my odd job, but if time willing, I'll write down some other strange events that I've heard about. Roughly a year ago, I found myself finishing a job sooner than I had expected. Due to that, I was stranded in an unfamiliar city without any place to rest in the middle of the night. Thankfully, I was able to find a motel that was open 24 hours. It was a bit run down and I feared how clean the rooms were, but it was better than the street for the night. I walked into the small, empty office to check in. I imagined the clerk was taking a nap, not expecting anybody to show up in the middle of the night. It took him a few minutes to arrive, and in those few minutes, I started to snoop through the magazines on the counter, old things about to be thrown away. I wasn't tired yet and I disliked most TV shows, so I often read in my spare time. I had finished my small stash of paperback books, so I was in need of some reading material that night. In that pile of faded magazines was a notebook, a thin one meant for schoolwork. Interested, I started to flip through it just as the clerk came by to greet me. After getting my room arranged, I had asked about the journal. A guest had left it behind a few days before my arrival. The clerk didn't know who was in the room, only that they had left the journal behind. The room door wide open and the bed pushed against the far wall. They had kept the journal thinking maybe the person was just going out and was coming back to it. Nobody showed up, so the clerk was going to have it tossed out. But I saved him a trip to the recycling bin out back and took the pile of magazines with the journal on top. After I was settled in my room, I started to look through the small journal again. It was a plain one that you could purchase anywhere for $1 or less. The front few pages had been torn out. The rest of the pages was filled with neat handwriting, detailing a story that most would find to be fiction. But I had seen stranger things in this world, and was not as fast to dismiss such stories. I have since given the journal to an acquaintance of mine that collects such things. I only remembered that journal now because I had heard about a person that had appeared in the journal. Since I have the time, it's best that I write down this first. Mind you, it's been a full year since reading this tale, so I may not get all the wording the way that it had been written, but the events are all the same. This happened when I was still in school. It's an event my town hasn't forgotten about. No one but myself knows the truth of what happened. Well, I'm the only human who knows the truth. I was in my last year of school, ready to be free and to enter adulthood. I counted down the days that I could escape this town and go off to college and what I thought at the time, my real life to start. I wasn't the only one. My 2 friends also wanted to get out of the slow and boring town. We all had different plans but swore that we would keep in touch after graduation. To celebrate, we planned to go camping over one of the last long weekends of our teenhood. Everything had been planned out months in advance, funds put aside and booze hidden away from when the time came. The first bump in the road was when Josh had started to date Rebecca. She was loud and the type that could not let any conversations die down or have any pauses. I did find her annoying, but I liked how Josh was happy with her. I didn't think she was really a bad person or I hated her. I just could only spend so much time around her at that time. I never told him, but I think Josh knew. Somehow, she found out about our trip and invited herself along. It was a setback, but I wasn't going to let her ruin our plans. I would just have to find a way to like her. And then our lovable Tristan sprained his arm. He was a big goofball and must have had bones of steel for never breaking one before. His mother was the overprotective sort and nearly didn't let him go into the woods with a sprained arm. I really wish that he had listened to her. We were young and thought that we were immortal. Finally, the day arrived and I was going over my bags, getting ready to get going when the phone rang. My parents answered it, and in the next few minutes they were in a frenzy. I had a sick aunt that lived out of state. She had been in for treatments and I guess wasn't doing very well. My father and mother needed to go and see her, and I had offered to come with. They told me that my aunt would want me to go on my trip after looking forward to so badly. They didn't think that I needed to go with them, but the problem was what to do with my younger brother. He was 13 and unlike Tristan, did not have bones of steel. He was accident prone combined with the worst luck of any person on the planet. Even though he could have been on his own for a night or two, it wasn't worth the risk. If he did hurt himself somehow, somebody needed to be there to get him to the hospital. It was such short notice that none of the people who normally could watch him were available. The only thing we could do was bring him. Bringing your little brother really was lame, but there was nothing that I could do about it. It just meant that I couldn't get wasted as planned. This was back in the days of those clunky flip phones. My dad gave me his in case my brother had broken an ankle or got mauled by a bear, so I could try and call for help. I shoved it into my jacket pocket. Because my parents took the car, we had to walk. It wasn't that far, maybe an hour at most, but it was an hour if you were in high school. My brother had slowed us down and we only arrived at the meeting spot when the sun had started to set. Tristan met me outside the woods and at the start of the trail. He gave me grief for bringing Jesse along, but I think he preferred my brother over Rebecca. Because I was late, they had already set up their tents. Me and Jesse scrambled in the dim light to set ours up. When I arrived, I found it pretty peaceful. Rebecca sat on a log by a fire that Josh had started. She looked a bit pale, and I never knew her to stop talking, so I was worried. "Hey, look at these weird flyers we found," Josh said before I could ask about Rebecca. He handed me a few sheets of paper. I had noticed a piece of paper or two stuck to the trees while me and Tristan had walked through the woods, but I didn't stop to read them. Apparently they had found a bunch, but he had used them to start the fire. "Lost in the woods, call this number. Need help, call it. Seeing strange things, yeah, you guessed it. Call this number." Each paper had the same phone number written at the bottom. Josh took the flyers back and tossed them in the fire before I memorized the number. Back then, not everybody had cell phones. I had already forgotten that I had my dad's phone in my pocket. If I did, I think we would have messed around trying to call it. But all of us were unaware of the phone and had just burned the papers. "Hey Jesse, why don't you go and find some more wood for us?" Josh had suggested when he saw my brother was already getting bored. The child took off holding a flashlight, glad to be trusted by an older person to do an important job. I got stressed over not being able to see Jesse or him going off into the woods, but he was smart enough to stay in sight of us. "You feeling all right, Rebecca?" I finally asked. As Jesse was going back and forth between the edge of the woods and dumping twigs, the three of us started to talk about school, but Rebecca stayed staring at the fire. She nodded at times but didn't contribute to the conversation. It was so out of character for her. "All right," she said, not looking at me. She doesn't have a fever, just tired, I guess," Josh told us and wrapped an arm around her. "Just tired," she said with a nod but still looked out of it. Maybe we should just take her back," I suggested and started to stand up. It was already dark, but I could find my way out of the woods if I followed the path with a flashlight. I didn't want him to think that I wanted her gone, but I was worried about her. "No." Her head shot up and she gave me a dark glare, and it made me freeze. Something was not right with her. She must have realized how odd she was acting, so she forced her face into a strained smile. "Just tired," she said again, sounding a bit more natural and like herself. Tristan didn't like the tension, and to break the mood, he brought out the marshmallows. Jesse magically appeared when the treats came out, and soon Rebecca's odd mood had been forgotten. The next few hours were a good time. We made s'mores, roasted marshmallows, and dared each other to eat them when they were still on fire. Our plan was to drink, but we only had like a beer each. Jesse tried a sip and gagged on the taste. I hoped the experience would turn him off from drinking until he was old enough. Even with these slight hiccups in our plan, we had a good time. Hours of chatting and sharing dumb stories, talking about future plans. When Rebecca had decided to turn in, I thought it would be best if we had an early night. I put Jesse into our tent and stayed outside to help Josh chop some firewood. And Tristan still had a sore arm, so we went to his small single tent next to mine, leaving us the work. We knew that if we didn't do it that night, we would be too tired or lazy in the morning. Josh brought a small hand axe to make it easier. It didn't take very long to make a decent-sized pile. Jesse did a good job of finding small branches, but we needed bigger pieces to keep the fire going. I don't remember what my last word had been to Josh. Most nights I sit awake trying to think what I had said to him when he went into his tent, or if I said anything at all to him. As last hours with your friends go, I had a good few. Inside the tent was a little bit crammed with me and Jesse. Somehow, I was able to sleep for an hour, but because of these small space, Jesse woke me up when he sat up. He crawled on me trying to find the flashlight. I was a little annoyed being woken up. "What are you doing?" I whispered in case everybody else was sleeping. "I need to pee," Jesse whispered back. I groaned. I didn't need to go, but I couldn't let Jesse go out on his own and get eaten by some wild animal. For some reason, a mental image of a monster-sized owl swooping down and just taking my brother away made me snort laugh. Knowing his luck, that would happen to Jesse. "I'll come with you." I got up and grabbed my jacket. And getting out and stretching, I waited for Jesse to start walking. Our fire was still going weakly. Jesse had turned on the flashlight and swept the beam of light into the woods, testing it out. I saw a flicker of white in the light and thought that it was another one of those weird flyers stuck to a tree. I stared at the white shape, trying to make it out right, and was distracted when I heard Josh's tent open. Staring at the white shape in the darkness, I saw it move. I was so sure that it was just paper fluttering in the wind. But then another white shape came from behind a different tree, and then another. Next to me, Jesse screamed. On reflex, I wrapped an arm around him and shot my head over towards Josh's tent to see what had scared my brother so much. Rebecca stood barefoot looking at us. "Just tired," she said in a strained voice that did not belong to Rebecca. Her front was covered in so much blood that it dripped into the dirt below. She still had her face, but her body looked too skinny and too pale. Long twisted fingers reached out towards us and she took a stumbling step closer. "No, just tired." Everything happened at once. Tristan came shooting out of his tent to see what the scream was about. He stared in shock at Rebecca and couldn't do anything when a blur of white came shooting out of the dark woods and in on top of him. I darted forward to grab the axe beside the fire pit, but let go of Jesse when I did. My dumb little brother ran. He ran screaming into the woods, still holding the flashlight. I had an awful decision to make, one that I still regret to this day. A creature was on top of Tristan, my dear friend, screaming and struggling to get it off of him. It was deathly thin and pale, its mouth filled with countless teeth, snapping and trying to get a bite out of his face. Rebecca still hadn't moved. I saw more faces of the pale creatures slowly coming out from behind the trees. Axe in hand, I grabbed the thing off Tristan and pulled it off him. I swung the axe into its neck, causing it to squeal horribly. Tristan looked up at me with a shockful and thankful look, but I left him. I don't think I killed the thing that had attacked him. I just turned and ran after one swing. I could still hear and see Jesse, so I couldn't stay and help Tristan. I don't know what happened to him after I left him behind. I wasn't even aware enough to realize that I was still holding the axe, leaving him defenseless. I could only hope that he got up and ran. I caught up to my screaming and crying brother. I grabbed his hand and we ran together, flying past more and more paper, stuck to trees and not stopping to read them. Each paper a pale white, making us think that those creatures were still coming after us. We saw some figures, but they were moving towards our camp for that moment. Then we ran in a panic. When I finally made us slow down, I realized in horror that we didn't know where we were. We had gotten lost in such a short amount of time. Jesse was sobbing but had run so much that he couldn't get enough air in to cry loud enough. My head darted around looking for more creatures. Keeping a grip on Jesse's hand, I made us walk, trying to find the trail. By sheer luck, we didn't come across any more creatures but found ourselves in a clearing. The full moon giving us enough light to see by, so I made Jesse turn the flashlight off to save batteries and to not let the creatures see us. I let him cry as quiet as he could. I didn't blame him. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw White and raise the axe. On a tree beside us was a piece of paper that had not been there before, paper that I had mistaken for a monster. As I stared at it, writing appeared. "Lost in the woods, being chased by monsters, a little brother with you. Your name is Cal. If that's you, call Jake. No, really, call me." Under the words was the same phone number as before. It was just too weird though. Yeah, being chased by a monster was scary, but this was even weirder. I was wearing my jacket and had the phone in my pocket. I didn't think that we had anything to lose by calling the number. Our situation couldn't get much worse, right? Of course, I first tried to dial 911, but static only came through. With shaking fingers, I dialed the number. A single ring next to me made us both jump. You kiddos need some help. I pulled Jesse into a protective grip when I heard the voice. Beside us was a person that had not been there before, a flip phone still in my ear. Even in the situation that we were in, I didn't trust the stranger. They were wearing a black coat so large that it wasn't practical. The sleeves hung close to the ground and the collar covered half their face. By their voice and what was visible of their face, I couldn't tell what gender they were. But if this was Jake as mentioned on the paper, then I'm guessing they were a guy. Jake was tall and only took 2 steps to get in front of us, staring down over the collar of the coat. Red hair covered half of Jake's face and the right eye. The left eye was a deep glowing red that made me realize that I was not dealing with somebody human. "Can you help us?" Jesse whimpered and I held onto him tighter. "Well, sure I can," Jake purred, looking pleased by our fearful state. I saw more creatures' faces off in the distance through the trees. They looked weary of the newcomer, but I knew that they would come towards us soon. My distrust was forgotten when I saw the faces of the pale creatures starting to surround us. "Please save us from those Wendigos," I begged. I didn't actually know what those creatures were, so the first monster name that came to my mind spilled out. "They're not Wendigos," Jake stated point blank. "It doesn't matter." I spat out my anxiety spiking when a pale face came even closer through the trees. "Oh, it does. If you say, 'Oh please, Jake, just save us from some Wendigos,' I'm bound to only save you from Wendigos. These things could eat you and I could do nothing. Wording is important, you know." I was half listening to Jake, but I still got the point. Jesse was clinging on to me as he started to freak out over just how close the creatures had gotten. A brave one had gotten only a tree away. It stared at us with dead eyes, with its mouth wide and drool dripping to the forest floor. "Please save us from these things trying to eat us," I said quickly, my voice pitching in panic. "What would you two give me in exchange for saving you?" Jake asked, a red eye gleefully looking down at us. "Anything," I shrieked as a creature finally jumped towards us, its twisted long fingers reaching out ready to tear us apart. I was desperate and so overcome with fear that I didn't think of what I had promised to give. I only wanted us to get out of those woods. I was convinced the pale creature was going to reach us. It was so close to my face that I could feel its rancid breath, but then it suddenly was gone. Jake had moved so fast that I didn't even see what had happened. One moment I was a second away from having my face bitten off, and then the next, the creature had its head crushed into a tree, and the pale body limp on the ground. "Hold my coat." The coat was tossed at us, but I let it drop, being in shock of what had just happened. I stared at the dead creature and then looked around to see the rest retreating further back after one of their members had been killed. They still stared at us through the darkness, but almost looked scared, jittering through the trees. "You're a girl?" I asked Jake, letting the first question that came to my mind slip out. There was a lot more pressing matters at hand, but for some reason that was what my brain had wanted to say. Jake had a scar over the right side of her mouth that exposed teeth, and twisted her top lip, making her have a forever smirk. She was only wearing black shorts and a sports bra, and she was skinny. Skinny enough for me to see all of her ribs, but oddly enough, her arms looked muscled. "Wrap the coat around yourself. It'll cover up your smell and protect you from those things trying to bite you. I need to attract them to me and put them into a frenzy to take all of them out at once." Jake reached out and took my jacket sleeve and pulled so quickly that it easily tore off. I was a bit annoyed, but I let her. She then roughly took my hand and I cursed when she cut a deep gash into the palm, letting the jacket sleeve soak up the blood as she offered no apology. Jessie looked worried but also was too traumatized to react. When the sleeve was wet enough, Jake tied it around her forearm and walked away from us into the middle of the clearing that we had stumbled into. I quickly wrapped me and Jessie under the large coat. I poked my head out at the top so that I could still see what was going on. The creature had started to make hissing noises when my hand was cut. They could smell the fresh blood and they no longer were scared of Jake. They only wanted to find the source of the smell so that they could finally eat. With Jessie safely under the coat and my arms wrapped around him, holding as tight and close as possible, I watched what on earth Jake was going to do. Standing in the middle of the clearing, she waited for the creatures to come closer. The moon was full so that I could see what was happening perfectly. A blur of white darted out towards her only to be slammed down into the ground. Without giving it time to recover, Jake twisted its head clean off. That gave me some hope of living through the night. She was strong enough to swat away the monsters that had killed my friends. Motivated by the smell of blood, 2 more creatures came at her. They screamed a horrible sound that made my stomach turn to ice. One of them cut Jake's shoulder before it went down, but she didn't seem to notice in the slightest. In fact, she was smiling. In a short time, I could no longer count the number of pale forms in the woods around the clearing, and I soon realized what our downfall could be. Jake was strong but could not deal with the sheer number of monsters coming for her. If more than 3 came at her at once, she would get cut or harmed before she would kill her attackers. I watched my fear returning as 2 more took a fallen one's place. Jake took a brutal cut across her stomach from the creature's claws, but for some reason she started to laugh again. Every cut she received, she started to laugh harder. Tossing dead and torn apart creatures, her laughter grew to a crazed shriek. Jessie started to shake under the coat, not seeing what I was, but the laughter was scaring him. He had no idea what was going on and thought that a new monster had appeared. I held him, forcing myself to not worry. Jake was on our side. We would live through the night. That was all that mattered. What I saw next made me completely doubt that fact. Something else came out of the forest, and it made the remaining creatures scatter and try to get away, only to be caught and scooped up by the new monster's many arms. It had somewhat of a human shape. Countless human arms lined each side of its body, human legs twisting together to make a pair supporting its massive weight. Its head was made up of skulls and half-decayed faces. When it snatched up a creature, alive or dead, the bundle of heads parted to show a ring of sharp teeth. It tossed whole bodies down into the deep, endless-looking mouth. I had no idea how Jake was going to fight this thing as injured as she was. A flicker of doubt crept on her face, seeing the new monster made my stomach drop. I considered turning to run, but my legs wouldn't move. My body was shutting down, unable to do anything, but watch as the monstrous thing launched itself across the clearing straight at Jake. I couldn't do anything as it bore its weight down on her, forcing her to the ground. With a great strain, she kept at it above her, her small arms looking like they were at their breaking point, lifting up such a great mass. The arms of the monster grabbed at her, pinning her flailing legs down, trying to pull at her arms. Clawed hands started to dig into her stomach, tearing apart skin easily as she screamed. I felt bile rise to my throat as I stared in utter horror. Jake's organs were being torn from her while she was unable to do anything but scream. I thought that we had lost and that it was the end. The monster parted its head to drop one of Jake's legs that it had ripped from her into its horrible mouth when her screaming had stopped. In my utter confusion, I saw that she was smiling again, the smirk that made it seem like everything was going according to her plan. And gotcha, I heard faintly before her hair started to glow like embers, and then a blast of flame shot up from her directly into the amalgamation's open mouth. And I mean a blast. A tunnel of flame shooting upwards, bringing to hit the monster's head, was burned to nothing in seconds. The light was so bright that I could barely see, and the flames burned away leaves on trees at the start of the clearing. I had to duck under the coat trying to protect my face and eyes from the heat. I don't know how long I stayed under the coat, holding my little brother, saying to him that everything was going to be all right. I really wanted to just stop right then. The monsters were gone and we could rest, but I couldn't. I had to see what happened to Jake and if there was anything left of her. She was owed that much. Reassuring Jesse some more, I got out from under the coat, leaving him hidden. The air smelled awful. A mixture of burnt flesh and decaying meat made me gag. I composed myself to look around. Some small spots were flickering with flame. Bushes and leaves I hoped would go out before they turned into a real fire. I could still feel the heat in the air. The body of the monster was still, tossed aside and head melted off. Jake was next to it, half her body missing but strangely, one eye looking at me as if waiting for me to come closer. But she still couldn't be alive, right? A little help here, Scout. Her hoarse voice made me jump and run over to her. I was going to lose my dinner if I looked at what had happened to her stomach, so I focused on her face. I need you to do something for me. How are you? I started to ask, but she cut me off. You need to cut off my head and attach it to one of those creatures' bodies. One without broken arms or one you think looks most attractive. She let out a laugh, but it was so hoarse that it sounded like a cough. I don't think I can. I stuttered, feeling still on the verge of being sick. You said you were open to do anything if I saved you, right? With a final laugh and a smile still on her face, Jake stopped breathing. The remaining heat and the small fires flickered out at the same time as her. She was right, I did agree to do anything for her. Wording was important, as she said. I had to do this. I left the axe with Jesse, and when I went to grab it, I checked on him, making sure that he didn't see any of the dead around us. The first one that Jake had killed was close, so I picked it up under its arm and dragged it to the clearing. She had smashed its head, so I didn't need to cut it off, but cutting hers off proved to be an ordeal. I had to stop fairly often to dry heave and shake. I'll never forget the feeling in my hands of the axe cutting into bone. When she died, her smile was still on her face. I didn't know if it was because of her scar, or because her muscles hadn't loosened yet, but she was still smiling. It was a very surreal experience holding a smiling head in my hands. I put it on the creature's neck as fast as I could, while rubbing my palms on my jeans trying to remove the feeling. I wondered if I had to attach the head somehow, with thread or tape, but that question was answered seconds after Jake's head is connected to the dead body. The parts of her old body fell into piles of ash. The body that her head was loosely attached to burst into flames and blackened. The creature's body peeled away and Jake's appeared underneath. Her wounds were healed and she was very much alive as she sat up, rubbing her neck. To my horror, she sat without anything covering her. Even the clothing that she had been wearing faded when her old body had. Even after I saw what Jake looked like under her coat, I doubted her gender. She was built like a male, meaning she had a completely flat chest. But seeing her exposed, it made me fully realize that she was in fact a girl. I bolted, grabbing her coat and tossing it on top of her in record speed. I didn't want my brother to see a weird naked woman on top of everything else that he saw that night. She didn't look embarrassed, instead she cackled at my flushed face. Can we leave now, please? I asked, trying to cut through her laughter. Alright, fine, don't be grumpy. I doubt anything's going to attack you two after all of this, but I'll still walk you out of the woods. If you're still frightened, you can hold my hand, little ones. No thanks. We both shot at the same time. Oddly, Jake's smile fell a little as she looked a little offended by our rejection. His legs are too short. Carry him. Jake ordered me, talking about my brother. Jesse had been so shaken up that I doubted he could walk, and it would take us forever to get out of the woods. I hoped Jessie on my back and my cut hand still stinging. I kept the axe in my other hand for the walk back. And just in case, reaching out, Jake placed a hand on Jessie's head. He slumped forward, becoming dead weight on my back. I was about to lay into her when she waved me off. I just put the little one to sleep. He's seen enough this night. I can carry him if you wish. In fact, if you are not so attached, I can take him off your hands entirely. I'm aware of how bratty little brothers can be. I was exhausted from everything that happened. Even so, I refused to be teased by this woman. At least I hoped at the time she was teasing me. Don't touch him. I snapped and nearly took a step back when her smile fell. Jake was by far more terrifying than anything in the forest at that moment. Oh, and how are you going to stop me? You both promised me anything if I saved you. I can collect that at any time. I could take him right now or parts of him. He has such lovely blue eyes, and I'm looking for a new one to replace my own. Reaching out while she spoke, I was sure she would do something horrible if I didn't stop her. I couldn't think, so I acted on instinct. When her hand came closer, I turned my head to bite down on it as hard as I could. I felt hot blood come into my mouth, so hot that I thought my tongue would burn off, but I didn't let go. It tasted awful and it hurt, but I held fast. Another laugh from her and she easily pulled her hand away, the bite mark healing before my eyes. We don't owe you anything, I spat, trying to get the taste out of my mouth. I saved you, you were dead. You already got something from us. And that horrible sneer came back, an expression that made my heart nearly stop. You think I could die from something like that? I would be just fine. I only switched bodies for your sake. I would have healed, but a new body got you out of these woods faster. Besides, do you think I could ask just one thing of you? You agreed to anything, remember wording is important. I can ask anything of you until you both die. Even if you somehow do save my life, that does not mean that we're equal. That is the deal we made. Anything for your life. She looked so proud of herself, cackling away as I finally let my mistake fully sink in. That's not fair, I said, hating how my voice trembled. Fair, fair. Her voice had gotten louder and excited. Fair is a human concept. What do you think you made a deal with? Not human, and fair is not what I do. I had to do something. I had to think my way out of this. I didn't let my friends die only to have Jesse under Jake's thumb for the rest of his life. I at least needed to save him. That's what older siblings are for. I'll take Jesse's debt to you. I'll do anything for you, anything. You don't get him, I said so suddenly that it shocked myself. Oh yeah, now how is that fair for me? You were just talking about that word. Why would I take an offer that I lose on? Because fair is a human concept and you're not human. You shouldn't care about how fair the offer is. I could feel myself sweat as I waited for her reaction. She started to smile again, but this time it was a softer expression. She was laughing, but one that a proud parent would make. Fine, I'll take that unfair deal. You belong to me, but your little brother shall be spared. Let's get out of these woods. Your human smell is making me hungry. I relaxed for the first time and watched as Jake started to walk away, leaving me behind. Adjusting Jessie on my back, I followed after her to finally leave everything that happened behind. The walk out of the woods was uneventful. Jake got us back to the trail and walked in front, but I knew no other monsters would come for us. I was tired from carrying my sleeping brother but refused to stop or rest. When we got out, I stood in the parking lot, staring at Josh's car, trying to think of what to do next. Jake didn't leave and watched my silent breakdown. "And give me the axe," she said, holding her hand out for it. Huh? I didn't even know that I was still holding it. I gave it to her, glad to be free of it. "Nah, let me borrow your brother for a few seconds." That made me back away from her defensively. She let out a sigh. 3 people died. You humans are going to make a big deal out of it. I have a human that is a loose end for myself. I can make him confess to chopping up your friends with this axe. The police will be happy to have a closed case and I can get rid of that human. I don't do things for free and you cannot offer me anything more. This way I can do a cleanup and have it benefit myself, she explained. Those flyers, you knew that we were in danger. Why didn't you save us sooner? I asked, remembering the four of us at the camp looking at the odd papers. You didn't call me. I can't do things for free. I can't come until I'm asked. In fact, helping humans is not my job. I do this for fun. It's my fault. Tears came to my eyes. I had a cell phone. If I had called Jake sooner, we may all still be here. And no, it's not anyone's fault. Like I said, creatures don't do fair. It's not fair that one of your group members was replaced and it killed your friends. You are not aware of the dark side of this world, so why would you bother calling for help if you didn't know the danger? I didn't know if she meant to try and cheer me up. It wasn't in her character, but it made me feel a small bit better. My friends were still gone, but at least I knew there wasn't much that we could do about it. I can alter your brother's memory. You and him left to pee in the woods, got lost, and when you came back, a crazy man had killed your friends. That is going to be the truth of what happened. Not a good truth, but one that we can handle. And I find children are bad actors. I can't have him rambling on about monsters. That made sense. I didn't want to trust her with my brother, but I did think in the long run it would be better for him to remember something a bit more down to earth. A therapist could deal with axe murder trauma. He would have more issues trying to get people to believe him about pale forest creatures instead. A few waves of Jake's hands over Jesse's forehead was all that it took to alter his memory for when he woke up. Why don't you change my mind too? I don't think you want me to know about strange creatures of the night. I asked but got a sharp kick to the shin. I don't do things for free. Jesse was so traumatized by what happened his memory changed on its own. You got it? I got the hint. Apparently helping Jesse was a freebie. One that we couldn't talk about and had to pretend Jake did nothing. And I can't change yours. You made a deal with me. Let's say that I made a deal with that I would save you for a nice dinner. And then you gave me that dinner and I just changed your memory of either not giving me what I was owed, or to you saying that you owe me something else. I hate the rules, but they keep some sort of order. If you make a deal with a creature, your memory cannot be altered, but some don't give a slightest care for the rules. Believe it or not, you got a good deal with me. I didn't want to consider the fact that Jake was really better than some monsters out there. She was a monster in her own right, but at least we made it out alive. Why did you save us? I asked. She mentioned that saving humans was not her job, and she had gotten hurt and doubted having her organs torn out was fun in the moment. She looked back and forth as if she was debating if she was going to answer me. I have a soft spot for kids, she admitted, finally looking almost embarrassed. Before departing, Jake told me to keep her number. She gave me a grim prediction that once a person encounters a supernatural creature, they are almost always killed by one even if they lived through the first encounter. Everything played out the way that she had said. A man confessed to killing Josh, Rebecca, and Tristan. They found their blood but no bodies. I fear my friend had been added to the amalgamation that Jake had killed, or turned into a pale creature that may still hunt in the forest. I stayed in my small and sleepy town. You would think that after what happened I would never go to the woods, but I am now a volunteer ranger. I'm the one who goes trying to find lost people. Sometimes I find them and sometimes I don't. Jesse turned out as fine as he could. He's going to therapy still, but he's starting to date, which makes me happy. All I wanted was for him to live a normal life. I could have easily thought this whole thing was a bad dream, something that my mind made up. I wanted to force myself to believe that. I have never seen anything strange since even in the woods. I've heard stories, but nothing like what I had gone through myself. I almost was able to settle down into a normal day-to-day life, until she showed up to collect my debt. She told her to meet me in her motel room at 8 p.m. I don't know what she wants with me and I didn't ask, but I don't think I'll be seen again. I don't know why I'm bothering to write any of this down. Anybody would think this was fiction or that I lost it. I still arrived hours early to write this down in my old school notebook. Even if one person finds it, I want to warn them about making deals. If it was just me that night, I would have let myself get eaten, but Jesse made it out. I don't know what cost it is going to be for me, but it's almost too great. I now know that there are things far worse than death. If you ever find yourself in a situation that you can make a deal with a monster, and if you can take a second, then please think. You don't want to be in debt to these things. And if you do become indebted, keep in mind, they are not fair creatures and wording is very important. Sadly, that was all that was written in the journal. I was to leave the next morning so that I could not research the story further. Even now, I'm running out of time to write down what I read a year ago. My job does keep me busy. I had heard another story about this Jake recently. She was with a different creature and did not do much, but she was there. Maybe I can find more stories about her. I'll sit and listen to anything that comes my way, and I'll write down any more good tales that come along. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and it's a good reminder that whatever you're dealing with, you don't have to go through it alone. Life isn't always easy. Some nights your mind just won't shut off. You're thinking about work, the future, things you wish that you would handle differently. I think everyone has something like that, something that keeps them up. And it's easy to feel like you're supposed to figure it all out by yourself. But the truth is, nobody has all the answers. Talking to someone who can listen, understand, and help you work through things can make a real difference. Therapy is a space where you can get that kind of support. BetterHelp connects you with licensed therapists, and they match you based on your needs through a short questionnaire. If your match isn't the right fit, you can switch at any time. With over 30,000 therapists and millions of people served, a lot of people are finding support that way. So if you've been feeling overwhelmed, stuck, or just unsure where you are right now, this month is a good time to check in with yourself and maybe take that step. You don't have to be on this journey alone. Find support and have somebody with you in therapy. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/Mr. Creeps. That's better, HELP.com/Mr. Creeps. Hey Train, did you finish your rounds? I pulled myself from my book and nodded at my coworker Susan. Did the entire wing about 15 minutes ago. All our patients are currently slumbering or hooked into their life-extending machines, I said. No medical emergencies, no deaths, no wanderers. Oh, don't call them life-extending machines. Sounds like we're sucking their life force to fuel our batteries or something. It's ghoulish. Life-affirming machines any better? Not really, she said with a yawn. Any non-medical issues? Actually, yeah. Something cracked Marge's bathroom mirror. I swept up the glass on the floor, but be careful when you're over there. I may have missed a piece or two. Add it to the list of things that Leo won't fix, Susan said, referencing the notoriously cheap owner of the place. Oh, it's okay. Marge mostly uses a bedpan anyway, Susan said. She joined me at the desk and nodded at the book in my hand. What's this week's read? A collection of Robert Bloch's short stories, I said. I'm currently reading Enoch. Who's Robert Bloch? Oh, a long-dead horror author. He wrote Psycho. Oh, I only ever saw the movie. She plopped down into her chair and rolled back a few inches. Any new patients? Not a one. Been slow if I'm being honest, I said, knocking on the wooden desk. So help me God if you jinxed us. Oh, we're good. Doc did his rounds with the hospice patients. Everyone is fine, so to speak. An orange blur came running down the hallway and leapt onto my desk. Sunkissed, Morning Light Assisted Living Center's resident cat purred and paced on the nursing counter. I put my book down and gave him a little scratch on his head. He purred, rubbed his face against my fingers before turning away from me and jumping into Susan's lap and settling down to sleep. Traitor, I said. Oh, Sonny knows who the pack leader is at Morning Light. She softly petted him down his spine, his backside rising with her touch. He trilled, circled, and lay back down. Seconds later, he was asleep. Oh, how can you stay mad at this furball? He's so stinking cute. Uh-huh. Where has he been all night? Wherever he goes to avoid people during the day. He is avoiding people tonight, correct? She asked. Outside the staff, Sunkist stayed away from most people who came into the wing. But now and then, we'll find him snuggled up with a hospice patient. Without fail, a few hours later, the person dies. He doesn't do this with everyone who dies, but he's done it enough that he's established a reputation. Yeah, the Orange Reaper has the night off. What do you think he senses? I shrugged. Maybe people about to die give off a pheromone only that he can smell. Creepy, Susan said, stroking his back. Can you smell death? He raised his head, meowed, and settled back down to sleep. The door to the wing opened and the swishing of overly large scrub pants rubbing against each other echoed down the hallway. Muted death metal followed. It was screaming from the earbuds of our third for the shift, Gus. Gus was young, just north of 23, and clinging to this job by the grace of God. I didn't mind him, but Susan loathed him. He walked up to the desk, plucked his earbuds out, and put them away. He pushed his long black hair behind his ears and he nodded at us. Any dead guys tonight? No, but the night's still young, I said. Doesn't that hurt your ears? What? He said before breaking into a braying laugh. Don't call the patients dead guys, Gus. We've had this talk before. Sorry. Any corpses tonight? That's somehow worse, Susan mumbled. Her pets on Sunkist's back got firmer. Oh, Fleabag hasn't been stalking any doors. Oh, don't listen to him, Sonny, Susan said. He hasn't focused on anyone, but I've caught him circling George's room. That guy gives me the creeps. He's sweet, Susan said. He lost his whole family in a fire right before he came here. They had moved in to help him, she said, stopping herself. He probably doesn't even remember what happened. Maybe he was responsible, Gus said, trying to wind Susan up. It worked. Not everybody has your compassion, Gus. Some of us care about people. I care about people, but I'm not blind to the fact that some people are just, bad. Did you get that from looking in a mirror? Susan said. Gus wanted to retort, but my slight headshake stopped him, and he swallowed his response. Playing referee between these two wasn't one of my official job responsibilities, but it had become one. I didn't mind keeping the peace, but I wished that these two would remember that we were adults and didn't need to keep needling each other. Everything okay on the other side of the veil, Gus? Morning Light Assisted Living was divided into two wings. The East Wing was more of a retirement home. Some medical care, but more or less the last refuge for old folks with nowhere else to go. The West Wing, though, that was where people came to die. It's quiet. Must be a Matlock marathon or something. The fogies are all cooped up, trying to solve the mystery before the man himself does. I'll take a quiet night, I said, putting down my book. Psycho ruled, Gus said, holding out his fist for a bump. I returned the favor. You guys talked to Sven at all? Gus asked. He was gone when I clocked in, I said. Oh, I hardly see him anymore since he moved to second shift, Susan said. I miss Sven. Oh, what's going on with him? He mentioned something odd, Gus said, running his hand through his hair. Said that he had heard something in the air vent by room 6. Air? Susan asked. Obviously not just air. Why would he bring it up to me if it was just air? What did he hear? I asked, playing referee again. Voices mumbling. I didn't believe him at first, but he was as serious as a tax audit. Well, did he tell you what they were saying? Said that he couldn't make it out. Passed by the vent a few times though, and he heard something. Weird, I said. Room 6. Yeah. George is in room 6. And Gus turned to Susan and nodded. Told you that he was creepy. You want to go listen? I put the bookmark in my book. Sure, I said, turning to Susan. You want to come? Oh, Sunkissed is so comfortable, she said, nodding at the dozing cat. I don't want to disturb him. It was hard to argue with her. Sunny was comfortable. Gus and I shrugged and headed down the hall to investigate the whispering air vent. When we were halfway down the hall, Gus leaned in and whispered, You think Susan likes me? I inhaled and let out a soft sigh. Susan didn't hate Gus, but he gave her fits. Gus wasn't as detail-oriented as she was, and the two clashed. Gus wasn't bright, but he also wasn't an idiot. He was skating on thin ice, and if Susan ran to the boss to report his failings, it could be the weight that would plunge him into unemployment. You guys know how to push each other's buttons, but she doesn't hate you. A bit of friendly advice, though. Just double-check the work before you say it's done. That's what drives her nuts. Oh, duh, he said. I mean, like, as a potential boyfriend. I laughed. Man, Sunkissed has a better chance of becoming president than that happening. Gus smiled. Hey, opposites attract, am I right? You guys attract like vampires in sunlight. He shrugged. It'd be a quick fling, but burning hot, he said with a smirk. You get it? Yeah, I do, I said as we stopped at the door to room 6. The air vent was above it. It gently blew out cold air, but no voices, and no words, and not even a syllable. Is this it? Gus nodded. Said that he heard whispers or something. Did you hear anything? Other than the AC. I stopped. There was something there, muttering, but it wasn't coming from the vents. It was coming from inside the room. I turned to Gus, whose eyes went wide from the mumbling. Holy shit, he whispered. I cracked open the door. A shadowy figure was standing just on the other side, mumbling something that my ears couldn't pick up. The injection of light from the hallway made the figure turn toward me. I sighed. Grandpa George. Fun fact, George wasn't my grandpa. He was one of the several dementia patients that we had in the wing. In my time working here, I found that using grandpa or grandma when I speak to them helps them focus. There's a spark of recognition in the title that sets them at ease, so I roll with it. The confused, elderly man stood in his nightshirt, shielding his eyes with his trembling hand. Prickly silver stubble covered his face. His deep wrinkles reminded me of the gullies and folds of a mountain. His sunken eyes had that dementia dullness, a sheen of what once was but never can be again. Who is that? Grandpa George, it's A-Train. What are you doing up? A-Train? He asked, confusion knitting his hairy caterpillar eyebrows. Oh, my grandson. I smiled. You got it. You gave us all a start out here. Thought that you had snuck a pretty young thing in there with you. He waved off my joke, but his grin was wide. Oh, not today, but soon maybe. I may know someone, Gus said from the hallway. She loves a silver fox. Oh, I'm not that old. I can still go all night, boy, he said, thrusting his hips. And dementia is a wild condition. People's internal wiring gets jumbled, and thoughts that may have stayed dormant in people's better years suddenly start sparking like a cut power line. I've had several patients discuss inappropriate acts or curse a blue streak to anybody nearby, or even unearth some ancient slur from the time before talkies. They can't help it. Who were you talking to? What? Just now before we opened the door. Who were you talking to? Topsy. Gus and I shared a glance. Who's Topsy? He asked. Oh, the little imp that lives in the air vents. Oh. It was the only thing that trickled out of my mouth. The rest of my questions remained stuck inside my brain, slowly creating a lake of confusion. He comes out at night, Grandpa George offered. Oh, he's a chatty fella. Reminds me of the tiny Scarpetto, a bunkmate during my army days. Would not stop yapping during lights out. Chew your ear off every night. Or he did until he took a bullet to the eye. When dementia-addled brains randomly fire off unsettling details about past events, remain calm. If you show any discomfort in that moment, it can make the situation harder to deal with. Even in their compromised state, their lizard brains can sense a change in your demeanor. The only thing worse than a memory-leaking dementia brain is a memory-leaking dementia brain riddled with anxiety and fear. Do you want us to scare Topsy away and let you get some shut-eye? Gus asked. Maybe bang on the vents or something. Oh no, George mumbled. He won't like that. It doesn't like much about this place. Especially you. If you do that, he'd probably kill you. The smile left Gus's face. He took a step out of the room and back into the hallway. I turned to George. Oh, Grandpa, that's not a nice thing to say to Gus. And Gus is good people. Oh, Topsy said that, not me. I took a step out into the hallway. George had rattled Gus's cage. He ran his hand through his hair and tapped his foot to a song that only he could hear. Oh, he's crazy. His brain is mush, man. He doesn't mean it. He exhaled. Oh, it's wild to hear somebody say that so nonchalantly, you know. What's that? Gus said, pointing at something on the ground near George's bathroom sink. I followed his finger until I settled on something reflecting at us. Gus walked into the room, pulled out his phone, and flipped on the light. He instantly recoiled, his phone clattering against the ground and cracking the screen. I walked over, forming a two-person fence to keep George from finding whatever had spooked Gus. What is it? I whispered. He picked up his phone, lamented the condition of the screen, and aimed the light at the source of his shock. Sitting in the middle of a pool of blood was the head of a rat. His body was nowhere to be seen. Its black glossy eyes and yellowed buck teeth reflected the light. I put my hand to my mouth to capture any words of disgust that might have come flying out at the discovery. Oh, once we were on R&R in Pusan, we told Tiny Scarpetto that we'd give him $10 if he took a dump on a lady. We didn't think he'd actually do it, George wheezed. Brown smear on her back. She was so mad at him that she kicked him square in the beanbag so hard that he was hospitalized for a week. Other than that, though, the girl was nice. No complaints from me. We ignored George's increasingly unhinged rambling confessions. Our attention was on the loose head on the floor near our feet. I squatted, took the phone from Gus, and I flashed the light around. Where's the rat's body? Oh, maybe Tiny Scarpetto ate it. "Oh, don't say anything about Tiny," George said, wheeling around and shoving Gus. The younger man wasn't ready for the blow and stumbled forward, shooting out his arms at the last minute before he went face first into the mirror. Gus turned, ready to come to blows, but took a beat and let the anger flow out of him. "Not cool, George. I'm here to help you. No wonder Topsy wants to gut you like a fish." I stood and got in between them. I turned to George and laid a calming hand on his shoulder. His body tensed. "Hey, Grandpa, let's remain cool, okay? No need for violence," I said in a measured tone. George's shoulders relaxed. "I'm not a violent man." I turned to Gus, leaned in close and whispered, "If you want to go back with Susan, I can handle this. George is pretty mellow." "He just threatened me." "Better than getting Tiny Scarpetto to crap on you," I said, trying to ease his mind. It worked. Gus gave me his stupid grin. "Yeah, you're right, sorry. Head back, I got this, and I'll clean up too." "You sure?" I nodded. "And Grandpa George and I got a connection. I can handle this. If I need help, I'll yell for it." "Cool," he said, breaking into a wide grin. "I can use this opportunity to woo Susan." I blurted out a laugh, but immediately apologized. "Sorry, I just don't imagine that that'll happen. They said we couldn't land on the moon A-train, and yet there are human footprints up there right now," he said, turning to start his mission. "George." A voice called out from the vent above us. We both froze, our heads craning to the vent. The hallway light reflected off the white of an eye, but before I could get a sense of what it was, Topsy went scurrying down the vents. Something clicked against the metal as it took off. It reminded me of dog nails on a tile floor. Was that a voice or something? "Oh, Topsy's not happy," George said, tutting us. "He's an angry little thing." "Where does Topsy live?" "Oh, in the vents." "Does he come out?" "Every night." "In your room?" "Oh, everywhere. He's seen everything you all do. He doesn't like it." I said, because screaming questions at a sick elderly man wasn't good for my future employment status. We should get you back to bed. You can talk with Topsy later, okay?" George didn't argue. I helped him climb in and made sure that he was good to go. The old man was unbothered by the skittering creature in the vent. He lay his head on his pillow and closed his eyes. Seconds later, foghorn snores came rushing out of his mouth. I should have walked out, but I wanted to test something. Pretending to close the room door, I slunk back into the shadows and I waited. My heart raced and I had to remind myself to stay silent and not impatiently tap my foot. I wiped my sweaty palms against my light blue scrubs and I kept my eyes locked on the air vent. George was fast asleep by the time that the first faint clacking of those nails on the metal rose above his snoring. My eyes were glued to the vent, waiting for Topsy to reappear. The little thing got closer to the slats. I took my phone out of my pocket and I got ready to snap a photo. Seconds later, a tiny clawed foot gripped the first slat. My head flipped as if the Earth's poles had reversed. I pressed the button to snap the photo but forgot that I had the auto flash on. The light illuminated the entire room for a fleeting second, but in that time it gave Topsy enough opportunity to skitter away. I stared at the picture. It was a blur. If you squinted, you could convince yourself that there was an outline of a claw, but it wasn't clear in the slightest. I cursed under my breath and slid my phone back into my pocket. When I opened the door to leave, somebody was standing on the other side. It nearly gave me a heart attack. It was Susan. She gave one look at my bloodless face and ushered me out of the room. "What's going on?" And Gus said that you heard somebody in the vents. "Yeah, we did." "What did they say?" "George." "And you're sure that it came from the vents?" "It sounded like it," I said. Even weirder, George said that there's a creature named Topsy that talks to him every night and lives in the ducts. "Well, George's brain is Swiss cheese at the moment," she said. "Susan, we both heard it. And look, I tried to snap a photo as it came back. It's not clear because it moved when the flash went off, but there is something there." I showed her the phone and her eyes narrowed, and her brow furrowed. She turned the phone upside down and zoomed into the ducts. Maybe it's a rat's paw, it's not really clear." "Oh, we also found a rat's head in the room," Gus said. "Gross, from Sunkist." Sunkist isn't that cruel. Something else did that. Maybe another rat. They fight with each other all the time. Larry mentioned one in the kitchen the other day. But we heard a voice in the vents, and last time that I checked, rats don't talk. "Oh, Ratatouille did," she said with a faint smile. "We could have a potential Michelin star chef crawling around in there." 1, the rat's name is Remy, and 2, that was a cartoon. And 3, I'm not joking, there's something weird going on. I don't doubt it, but let's not go right to the creatures in the vents that may kill us all, like right off the bat. Let's call an exterminator first, okay? Yeah, I'm fine with that, but we should keep a closer eye on things in this wing. If there's something odd happening, we should know what it is. I don't want anything hurting these people. "The same," Susan said. "Ditto," Gus said, joining us. "Some weird shit is happening, man. Weirdo stuff. Why aren't you watching the desk like I asked?" "You've got to come see what the video just caught," Gus said, pulling us back in that direction. His voice was excited and afraid in equal measure. It was as if he needed us to see what he had captured on the screen before figuring out which emotion would win. "What is it?" You just gotta come look, it's wild, man. More wild than what we just heard. That's in the ballpark." We made our way back to the nurse's desk, and Gus handed the snoozing Sunkist to me and slid behind the bank of monitors to pull up the video. His fingers flew across the controls, beads of sweat rolling down his forehead. I didn't want to believe it at first, but I've rewatched it about a dozen times. "When did this happen?" "Well, according to the timestamp, it just did," he said, pointing at a spot on the screen. "Okay, this is the east wing near the ballroom. Watch. June will walk past that door, right? And on the screen, June did as promised. Now watch the door." Through the grainy footage on the screen, the ballroom door popped open. It slowly creaked the entire way to reveal nothing on the other side. Susan frowned. "That's it. Just wait." At the bottom of the door, a tiny hand reached out from the darkness for the briefest of seconds. It clutched the doorframe. A second hand joined the first. Right before this thing could dart out into the hallway, June passed by again. The thing retreated into the darkened ballroom. "What the hell was that?" I said. "Roll it back." Gus did. We watched it several more times. My conviction grew with each replay. Susan's belief, though, it died on the vine. "It's 2 little white dots, it could be anything. It's camera compression, probably." "It was a hand," Gus said. "It looked like it," I agreed. "Did anybody over there witness it?" "Haven't asked." "Well, let's change that then," Susan said, grabbing a walkie. "June, are you there?" A brief pause before a warm and friendly voice came back over the air. "Hey, Susan, what's going on in the trenches?" "Oh, a typical evening over here. We were checking the cameras and we think that we may have caught something strange. Have you seen anything weird on your side of the building? Oh, I saw Butch eat a Twinkie with a Tapatio on it. Does that count? No way. Butch eats Tex-Mex Twinkies, Gus said. That's rad. Susan gave him a cockeyed look as if Gus had spoken in some other language. I raised my hand. Word of advice, if you're gonna Google that later, keep the safe search feature on. You'll thank me. It took a second for that comment to hit Gus, but once it did, he giggled like a sleep-deprived kid. This whole thing had brought out a more playful side of him. It was kind of fun to have this dude around. No, but that sounds disgusting, Susan said. The door to the ballroom apparently opened by itself. Ooh, spooky. There were also hands, Gus yelled. Hands? Did Gus say hands? Yeah, he thinks that they were hands. It might be the video quality, though. Do you want to look for us? Not really, but we're slow over here. I'll grab Butch and we'll go together. Susan turned to us. When she doesn't find a monster or whatever, let's call an exterminator and go from there. Deal. Deal, I said. What if she does find something? Susan pursed her lips and hesitated for a second. Well, we call a priest, I guess. I don't know. Well, we know that Father Karras does make house calls. I don't know who that. Susan. The walkie squawked. Susan, are you there? I'm here, June. Butch and I walked into the ballroom and it's empty. Susan turned to us and nodded. Happy? What in Sam Hill? Came Butch's distant voice over the walkie. Oh, hold on a second. Holy shit, Butch. Is that real? Is what real? Susan asked, her voice a little rushed. Oh, what the hell is that thing? Ever seen something like that? Nah, not here. But when I was a trucker, Butch started. June, don't leave us in suspense, girl. Susan interjected, forcing a laugh. What's going on? It's... June started, but that's all that we got. The red power light on our walkie-talkie winked out. Susan gripped the dial and spun it on and off, hoping to power it back on. It didn't work. The walkie was dead, and she turned to Gus. Weren't you supposed to charge these? I did, he snapped. I even signed off on the chore list thing if you don't believe me. Look, I get that you don't like me or whatever, but you can't blame me for every bad thing that happens here. Guys, I said. I'm just playing the averages, and most of the time the culprit is you. Guys, I said, my voice rising. I know you're the one running off to the boss every other day, filling them up with stories about me, trying to get me fired. Susan laughed. I'm not saying shit to the bosses. The fact that you're accusing me of that proves you don't know a thing about me. I hate snitches. Then how did they know about the Doris thing last week? The only two people in on that day were you and me. We both agreed it was an accident, and lo and behold, I get called in and talked to about it. I swear that I didn't say a word. It was an accident. Work is hard enough without worrying about dozens of eyes on you at all times. If you're feeling the heat from management, you're doing that all on your own. Guys, I yelled. That cut through the noise. They both shut up and broke eye contact. This shift was grinding all of us down to the knob. I sighed, ran my fingers through my hair and collected my thoughts. We need to keep it cool, okay? We're all on the same team. Let's just dial it down some, okay? Sorry, Gus said. Same. I picked up the walkie. This thing was charged, but it's older than Jesus. Might have just died. We are in a place where things die. People, Susan corrected. People die, they aren't things. Gus was gearing up to respond, but I held up my hands to play referee. Okay, look, there's no reason that we need to freak out. Everything can be explained. We just have to find an explanation, that's all. Now, why don't? The door to the wing opened, shocking all of us. We relaxed when June and Butch came walking in. Butch was clutching something with two glowing red lights that reminded me of the pig's eyes from the Amityville Horror. Susan lit up when June walked in. "Girl, what the hell? You left me hanging." "Our walkie died," Susan said. "What's going on? Was it a ghost?" No, but it saw us," Butch said, placing the thing in his hand on the table. It was a small cube with a camera lens. The two lights were labeled Recording and Power. The name Work Eye was embossed in the plastic casing. "Tattlers," Butch said. "If we found it in the ballroom, then you know those sons of a put them everywhere. It ain't right." "Can you believe this?" June said, grabbing a pad of paper and a pen and jotting down the phrase, "We need to unionize." Susan quickly covered up the shared sentiment with a logbook, just in case somebody is watching in here too. "Oh, guarantee it, boss," Butch said. "I hate this nanny state shit. They did this behind our backs." "Did you see any ghosts or anything?" "No, possibly a rat in the vents. I'm afraid that we've got a nest nearby." "No money for rat poison, but gobs of it for spy tech. I hate this place, man," Butch said. I nodded down at the camera. "Easy, Butch, and this is still." "God dang it," Butch said, dropping to the ground and clutching his ankle. Blood seeped through the gaps in his fingers. "What happened?" June said, concerned. "Oh, I must have caught it on the edge of the desk," he said, standing straight. There was a jagged gash along the side of his ankle. Another inch and it would have gouged his Achilles tendon. "Oh, holy hell, that hurts." "Yeah, that looks deep," June said. "Let's get you back over to the medical side and see if that needs a stitch or two." "I'm probably gonna dock my pay for using their supplies," Butch said with a smile. "Y'all keep your heads on a swivel and hammer that edge flat." June tapped the logbook. "We'll have lunch soon, huh? Talk strategy." "Absolutely." Butch wrapped his arm around June's shoulder and the two of them hobbled back to the other side of the facility. As they left, and Gus stared at the little work eye camera that they had left. He took it in his hands, found the power, and shut it off. The red eyes faded to black. "This is pretty messed up, huh?" Susan removed the logbook and nodded down. "I agree," she said, eyeing Gus. "I told you that I wasn't the one saying shit." "Sorry," he said. "And I also said that wasn't a ghost in the ballroom. I'm 2 for 2, gentlemen. That earns me a break during the next time we have to do our rounds." Yeah, Gus said. I glanced down at the side of the desk where Butch had sliced his ankle. Maybe the metal corner had worn away and was sticking out, but nothing was out of place. I ran my finger over the metal edge. Maybe it was sharper than it looked. But running the tips of fingers over the edge confirmed that it was as sharp as a kickball. Butch couldn't have cut it on that. As I was running through scenarios, the overhead lights flickered. We glanced at the buzzing fluorescents, praying that they would stay lit. They blinked again, off longer this time. With a final shuddering rattle, the power in the building winked out. Darkness came faster than death. There are no windows in this wing, so the night swallowed us whole. I fumbled for my phone and switched on the flashlight. Susan and Gus did the same. Our 3 beams were a weak counter to the enveloping darkness. "Why isn't the generator kicked on?" Gus asked. Maybe there's a delay," I offered. "Or maybe Leo hasn't serviced them recently." "We have patience on machines," Susan said, her voice rising. "If the power stays off, they're going to." "Gus, you and Susan go check on the patients. I'll go see what's up with the generators. Maybe something's tripped in there and they needed to be restarted manually," I said. "Oh, this is just like Jurassic Park," Gus said, "minus the dinosaurs." "So nothing like Jurassic Park then," Susan jabbed. "I was talking about the generator thing," Gus said, turning to me. "You got me right." I gotcha, I said. Sunkissed, who had been dozing seconds earlier, snapped awake. He leapt off the chair, sending it spinning like a top. He hit the ground in a full sprint into the dark of the hallway, his footfalls growing quieter as he disappeared from our sight. What was that all about? Susan asked. Oh, Cat's here 4 times better than we do. I said, my mind flashing to the thing in George's air vents. Maybe he heard a rat. Or Topsy's on the loose, Gus said, blurting out my growing unease. He chuckled to himself. Hold on to your butts. I swallowed hard. God dang it, Gus. Okay, let's go. We set off on our tasks. Gus and Susan took opposite sides of the hall and checked down all our patients. I jogged down the middle of the hallway, heading toward the generator room and dreading each step. George's room was fast approaching, and an icy chill ran down my back that had nothing to do with conditioned air. I half expected to hear that raspy voice call out for me, but I strode past without incident. Thank God for small miracles. But that miracle ended as fast as it had arrived. Susan yelped from inside room 3. I halted my trip to the generators and I jogged back to join her. Mona, a lovely older woman winding down the clock with us, was dozing without a care in the world. Susan had pressed herself against the wall, the light from her phone splayed out in front of her, only showing the tips of her nursemaid shoes. But her kicks weren't the main event. To our shared disgust and horror, we spied a headless rat's rotund and leaking body splayed out in front of us, its stomach split down the main line. Its glistening innards clashed against the bright white tiles. Below the corpse, somebody had scrawled a ghastly message in dried blood. I am here. And the light on the floor started bouncing because Susan's hand was shaking. She turned to me, her face the same color as the tile, and tried to speak. Her lips moved, but the words stayed lodged in her throat. I leaned into her. Oh, it's probably a prank or something. The hell it is, she whispered back. This is some serial killer shit, A-Train. It was some serial killer shit, but I couldn't agree with Susan at the moment. If I did, I would lose her. I needed a rational mind to help ground us. Left to our own devices, Gus and I would assume this was the work of a witch or something. Mona looks okay. Dip out of here and head back to the desk. When I get the power back on, let's call the janitors to clean this up. Are there mops going to protect me from a killer's knife? You ever seen Mark wield that mop? He's deadly, I said, trying to lower the temperature. Her weak smile told me that I may not have hit the mark, but I was in the neighborhood. Head back to the front desk. After I get the generators going, I'll finish checking the rooms, okay? Okay, she said before adding a heartfelt, thanks. As I said, we're all on the same team, right? An ear-splitting meow came from the hallway. Sunkissed wanted something. I shook my head. Sunkissed agrees. She let out an uneasy laugh. And go see what he needs before he claws up the doors and Leo tells us to get rid of him. I left her and walked back out into the hallway. Sunkissed was pacing in front of the door to the generator room. His meows echoed down the hall. I flashed my light on him and he glanced at me. His sparkling eyes pleaded to be let in. I pulled out my keys to unlock the door and stopped. Something was skittering around in there. I pressed my ear to the cool metal door, shut my eyes, and focused. Whatever was in there was moving with purpose, on the hunt for some unknown treasure. Topsy's in there. I jumped out of my skin and wheeled around, ready to punch whoever had snuck up behind me. I held my punch, though when George's sleepy half-smile found me, he stood there in his stocking feet and disheveled hair without a care in the world. Christ on a bike, Grandpa George. What are you doing out of bed? Oh, Topsy told me you were here. Are you trying to stop him? I'm trying to turn the power on, I said, turning the key and handle. Why are you out of bed? Topsy said he was gonna finally do it tonight. Holy shit, George is missing, Gus yelled. He's with me, I yelled back, pushing open the door. You should head back. Sunkist darted into the room as soon as it was wide enough for him to slip in. Seconds later, he was hissing, yowling, and growling. Whatever he had encountered wasn't pleased to see Sonny either. The screeching reached a Beatles mania pitch, and the brawl began. I left George standing there, pushed the door open, and brought the beam of light around. Sunkist was rolling around on the ground in combat with something. His paws sank into the flank of his victim. The thing fought tooth and nail to avoid becoming Sunkist's latest snack. I couldn't get a clear glimpse of what he was brawling with, but my brain filled in the blank with a rat. But I never saw a tail. Sunkist yowled in pain, dropped his victim, and went running out of the room at speeds that would have sent a DeLorean back to the 50s. Instead of twin flaming trails, there were drops of ruby-red blood that followed him out of the room. I glanced back at where he was fighting, but it scrambled away before I could get a beat on it. Questions filled my head, but I pushed them aside and ran to flip on the generators. I had delayed long enough. I ripped open the electrical panel, eyed the emergency switch, and reached out to flip it on. Before I did, though, the power flickered. We had a heartbeat. Half of the overhead bulbs hummed to life, not fully illuminated, but enough to flood the darkness with a dull light. Oh God, no! Susan screamed from the hallway, her sobs quickly followed. And before I could run to her screams, sneakers squeaking on tiles came sprinting down the hallway. Gus came skidding to a stop. He was flushed and out of breath. Sunkist, he's dead, George said with a cackle. Dead as a doornail. What? Something stabbed him, Gus said. He's got little cuts all over his body. How Topsy got him. Said he'd start with the cat and go from there. Jesus, George, Gus said, disgusted. Come on, let's get you back to your room. He put his hand on George's shoulder to guide him out, but George pulled away from his grip. Oh, don't touch me. If Topsy sees you touching me. He trailed off into more cackling. Gus shot me a look. His eyes were wide and the blood had retreated from his face. The kid was a lot of things, but scared wasn't one of them. Something about George's demeanor was setting his teeth on edge. Grandpa George, don't be mean to Gus. He only wants to help. There was a clattering above us, and Gus and I both turned our attention to the air vents. George started laughing again, but these weren't the typical friendly Grandpa George chuckles. These were the laughs of a con man laughing in the face of his victims, taking perverse joy from the knowledge that they didn't understand they were being played. Rats, right? Gus said. Rats, I agreed. Oh, Topsy cleared out the rats, George said. How? George went stock still, his body rigid. He closed his eyes and let his head low back. I was afraid that he had passed out and was about to fall onto the floor. If he smacked his head on the hard tile, before I could move to stop him, he snapped his head back, stared a hole through my soul, and grinned. Topsy's gonna clean up all your messes. Grandpa George, what the hell are you talking about? I want to help you, but you're not making sense here. He shuffled his safety stocking-covered feet. Topsy's the only help I need. More unsettling laughter escaped his mouth. Well, until Topsy gets a W-2, he's not in the chain of command, I said, trying to turn into the spin and straighten out the evening. Now come on, it's been a weird night. Let's get you back to your room. George shook his head no and took off running out of the room. His unexpected burst of energy and speed caught us all off guard. Gus went to chase after him and was gone before I could take my first step. When I did eventually, my foot caught on Sonny's blood. My legs went out in front of me and I fell hard on my tailbone. Waves of pain radiated up my spine and spider-webbed out to my limbs. My hand instantly grabbed the spot and rubbed, hoping that mere friction would bring the relief that only pain drugs could. As I spun around from my back to my knees to stand up, my eyes caught tiny footprints in the blood. It wasn't a rat's foot. 7 toes up front and 2 in the back. The first and 7th toe were twice as long as the others. The backs ended in a point, which I had to assume meant a long, sharp nail. The distance between the steps told me that this was the gait of something on 2 legs and not 4. It couldn't have been a rat. The tracks disappeared behind the generators. I followed them and stopped cold. On the ground was a tiny homemade knife. Nothing more than a shard of broken glass wrapped in an old shoelace. Sun-kissed blood stained the tip. What the hell? I followed the footprints. They went up the wall and ended at the wrenched open air vent. My stomach flipped and my mouth went dry. Gus came skidding back into view. It snapped me out of my daze. Is George back in his room? I don't know, Gus said. I can't find him anywhere in this wing. Is Susan okay? He shook his head. Sun-kissed being hurt grabbed all her attention. He's still alive. She took him to the 24-hour vet down the street. She left us? I can't blame her. She spooked and Sun-kissed as one of us, man. You and I would have done the same. I wanted to be mad at her for abandoning us, but Gus was right. Sonny was a teammate and needed help. But still, my hands balled into fists, the tips of my nails carving crescent moons into my palms. What the hell are those footprints? Gus said, walking past me and over to the wall, his voice rising as he asked again, What are these, A-Train? I got no idea. Topsy. Are we gonna entertain the ramblings of a man with a melting brain? Hey, melting or not, none of this shit makes any rational sense, dude. I'm willing to believe the impossible. I didn't have a response. Gus was right. When rationality exits the stage, then what's left? Okay, fine. Topsy is real. Let's get some facts. What the hell is it? Gus laughed. Facts? Okay. Maybe it's a demon, an imp, a djinn. Man, I don't know. Where did he come from? Maybe he was spiritually bonded with a former patient. We've had all kinds of weirdos come through here. Would it really be shocking if one of them had bonded with a monster? Might explain some of the weird, random shit that happens around here. The host dies and then Topsy just hides in the air vents. Why? Gus threw up his hands. Man, I don't know. Maybe he's waiting for someone to kill. Maybe he loves air vents. Maybe he wants to weekend at Bernie, one of our fogies. I'm just throwing shit at the wall. Nursing school never covered patient monster pairing. A blur ran past the door. George. The old man shouldn't be able to walk that fast. His body was failing him and his number was ready to be called by the Reaper. But here he was, putting Jesse Owens to shame in our hallway. The galloping geezer made my brain snap into action. And Topsy's gotta be controlling George, right? I mean, that man needs help to drop a deuce, and now we should carry Richardson. That doesn't make sense unless he really is. Possessed, Gus said. Holy crap. The shrill bleating of medical machine alarms came screaming from the open door. Someone's IV lines had been disconnected, or worse, somebody was in danger of dying. I turned to Gus, but he was already breaking out of the door toward the source of the noise. Marge's room. And Gus skidded to a stop once his eyes found the message scrawled on the floor. Well, that's ominous. Putting his fear aside, he snapped into action. Somebody had tampered with her IV line. They had become occluded, keeping her from getting the meds that she needed. I turned on my phone to give Gus some light as he went about fixing Marge's lines. Her breathing was steady, but her heart rate had lowered. We were in a race against time. Feet slapping against the tile outside the room made me turn. George stood just outside the door. His white hair slicked with sweat, his chest rising and falling with each labored breath. He looked pale, more so than usual. Grandpa George? His body went as rigid as a plank of wood. His ancient eyes opened as wide as his sagging skin would allow. The upturned smile on his face deepened the already Grand Canyon wrinkles on his cheeks and forehead. "You can't save them all," he said in a voice that wasn't his own. "And you can't stop me now." He rocked back on his heels and his legs gave out. George collapsed to the ground, his head bouncing off the tile with a gut-churning crack. Blood pooled around his head. A bright blue smoke rose from his body, forming the number 85 before dissipating completely. There was a splash in the pooling blood. I took a step in George's direction to render aid, but froze when those 7-toed footprints appeared out of thin air on the tile in front of me. They trapezed through the blood, leaving a trail into Marge's room with us. I lost sight of them in the dark. "Got it," Gus said, slamming the IV stand door closed. "She's good too." The mechanical alarm stopped just as Gus's screams began. He dropped from sight, hollering that something had stabbed him. I ran to him and yanked him to his feet. Several new puncture marks marred the bottom of his scrubs. A blooming red stain grew on the blue fabric. "You little," Gus said, using me as a crutch and kicking at the air near his feet. His boot caught the unseen Topsy because the force of the blow sent its invisible body crashing into the toilet. Water splashed all over the ground. In the low light and spilling water, I just made out the outline of a tiny creature no larger than Sunkist. I let go of Gus, ran over to the door, and I slammed it shut. Topsy flung itself against the door, but it was too late. I had trapped him. It slammed into the wood, snarled, and started stabbing it with whatever blade he had used to dice up Gus's pincushion leg. I grabbed a chair, slid it under the handle, and turned to him. "How bad?" "I can move, but I wouldn't wager any money on me winning any races," he said, nodding at the door. "Is that gonna hold?" For now, maybe." He glanced out and found George's body. He nodded, shuffled to the chair, and I rushed over to check for a pulse. There wasn't one, and Grandpa George had run his last hallway marathon. And Topsy was throwing its body at the door. Each time it made contact, the door shook. I was worried that it would come tumbling down. My mind was swimming in deep water, and there was no sign of shore. "Hello?" A strange voice from above. For a moment, I assumed it was God, because who else would it be? But the voice called out again, and I traced its origin not to heaven, but to the air vent. "I can see you in the room, A-Train." It wasn't God. It was my boss and the owner of the facility, Leo. Quite a major step down from assuming that I was about to chat with the creator of all things. What the hell? Right track, but wrong train. Is Topsy alive? On cue, the little monster flung itself against the wall. Leo sighed. "Wonderful. What number do you see?" "What?" "No, when George expired, what number?" 85, I said. "Oh, we're ahead of schedule," he said with what I can only describe as perverse glee. "Whatever you do, don't touch a thing, and I'll be there in 10 minutes to help." "Where are you calling me from?" I asked. "Oh, you found one earlier. I got a notification when you turned it off." The camera that Butch found. "Topsy, I know you can hear me. Our agreement did not include my employees. Head back into the vents, I'll be there shortly." Topsy started throwing itself against the door. Seconds later, Topsy violently yanked the bathroom air vent off the wall and tossed it to the ground with a clang. The pitter-patter of feet in the vents above us had us both ducking out of instinct. Topsy had returned to its home. "Oh, it won't bother you now, just don't touch anything. I'll be there shortly." "What the hell is going on?" Gus yelled. Leo never responded. We were in the dark in every way a person could be. Down the hall, there was a loud bang and then another. until the hum of an engine coming to life rattled our brains. The generators had finally caught and started spinning. The overhead lights buzzed to life, showing us all the horrid details in Marge's room that we had missed in the dark. I didn't envy what Mark was going to have to clean up later. We were in stasis until Leo arrived. I glanced at Gus. He winced in pain. The bloom on his scrubs was growing. Let's clean out those wounds and get him wrapped. 10 minutes later, the doors to the wing swung open. Leo was standing there, flanked by 2 men dressed in all black, their faces obscured by medical masks. The 2 men went to tend to George's body, completely ignoring us. Leo didn't, though. Where's Susan and Sunkist? At the vet, Gus spat. I told Topsy 100 times to leave that cat alone, he said, shaking his head. I'll remind him. The 2 assistants laid out a stiff black body bag and unzipped it. The scent of new plastic wafted toward us. Without hesitation or disgust, they slid George's battered body into the bag. Poor George, Leo said. So bright when he first arrived here. His spark dimmed so quickly. Are you serious with this soliloquy shit? Gus snapped. The kid rarely got angry, but this ordeal had tapped into the source, and the rage was coming out through his pores. What is going on here? 10 minutes ago, some ghoul was killing patients and threatening us, and now you're here and it's singing Kumbaya in the air vents. What gives? I raised a hand again, still playing referee. We have a right to know what's going on. You have a right to a paycheck and little else, Leo said. Gus was ready to punch him, and Leo sensed the charge in the air. But perhaps a little insight is in order. I'll tell you what I can. What is Topsy? Gus spat. Oh, technically you could call him an imp, but that's only half of it. Even though they can be hard to control, I consider him an invaluable aid in a quest that I must finish. Quest? He sighed. A century ago, my relatives were in dire straits. They stood to lose everything my family had earned since arriving on these shores. We had fought hard for what we had, and we didn't want to lose it. To reverse course, they reached out to somebody who could help. But like all help, it came with strings. I'll just spit it out, Gus said, his hands balling up. Enough poetry. My family line would be secure indefinitely in exchange for my help in rounding up souls and escorting them to parts south of here. The silence was deafening. Gus and I shared a glance before we started nervously laughing. You're trying to tell me you're in the soul harvesting business? I am. 100 a year every year until I die. It's why I opened an assisted living facility. The nearly dead come to me. I don't have to waste all my time chasing them down anymore. It's a game changer in terms of saving time and effort. How? Well, the people that are in this wing are, let's say, suggestible. Topsy and I chat up the mush-brained folks, get them to agree to our arrangement, and I hit my yearly goal. Jesus Christ, that's evil. Leo chuckled. It's business, and it's often unsavory. Successful ones are anyway. How do you sleep at night? We're here to take care of these people. Are they not taken care of? I have cameras all over, and every day I watch you all doing a wonderful job caring for these people. These people, I will remind you, whose families left them to rot. Am I wrong to take in trash and turn it into something valuable? Am I wrong for streamlining this process? The 2 men in black came back and muttered something into Leo's ear. He nodded and they took off down the hall to do God knows what. Leo chuckled and shook his head. Oh, those 2 are such characters, but great at cleaning up Topsy's messes. Gus stood, winced, but walked down the door to the east wing. I'm done, man. You can take this job and cram it up Topsy's 5 butts. I'm gonna tell everybody about this place. Leo laughed at this. It was so unexpected that Gus froze in place. Nobody's gonna believe you. You sound insane. All of it would take would be for someone to dig into your employee file and discover that you're nothing more than a disgruntled ex-employee with an axe to grind. I know a lot of people. I'd find someone to believe me, Gus said, putting his hand on the door. Unless, of course, Topsy finds you first. Gus turned, his face ashen. The weight of the threat hit him like a bolt from on high. I'm not a heartless man, Leo said. I understand that this job is difficult, and doubly so now that you're in on the scheme. Let's say you both get a $15,000 bump in pay. Would that help everybody move past this unpleasantness? All the moisture in my mouth vaporized. Without realizing it, Gus, Susan, and I had waltzed into a bear trap. We were stuck here. We had become cogs in an infernal machine. My stomach roiled and I chewed back the vomit that was rising in my throat. Gentlemen, you're not the first employees to figure this out, and doubtful you'll be the last. Hell, Sven figured it out and now he's got the shift that he desired. Play ball, Hod, it's just easier for everyone. We didn't respond and Leo took that as an agreement. He smiled, walked to the desk, and tapped at the paper with June's unionization message. Oh, and by the way, if this kind of talk continues, I'll send Topsy to negotiate terms. With that, he walked out of the room. Gus, dazed, shuffled back over to the desk. He slumped into a chair and put his head in his hands. If he had something to say, the words got lost in the maze of emotion. Hello, a soft voice said. It was Marge, and she was out of bed and hauling a rolling IV stand with her. She was half awake, but to be fair, she's always had that gaze these days. Dementia was eating her brain whole. Somebody was calling my name from the air vents. Gus sighed and stood. It was probably nothing, he said. The words barely audible, as if his mouth was too ashamed to claim them. Let's get you back to bed, huh? I'm always grateful to read posts from others explaining the rules of particular places. A library where you mustn't interrupt the girl in the reflective jacket who reads collective ESVN poems to herself until midnight. A campsite where you must politely offer some of your food to the faceless people who visit your campfire. An old house where you must not look out the window if you hear the sound of bells. And particular places have particular rules. It might be because they're ancient, special, haunted, cursed, or just particularly beautiful places for other things to make their homes. Sometimes you can learn a little from reading others' lists. Others' hard-won knowledge of what is or isn't safe. But spirits are petty and varied. One will tear out your tongue if you speak to it. Another will kill you for rudeness if you don't. It takes an expert on the area to know. I don't live anywhere quite like that. I live in the old part of Edinburgh. There's nothing cursed or ancient about my flat. It's actually probably one of the least supernatural places in the city. It's safe. The cities often don't have guardians in quite the same way that rural places have. Forests, lakes, valleys, and even big ranches. They'll have owners or rangers or guardians, often passed down through generations or trained and picked carefully by mentors. I like talking to people from those wild places, the guardians, rangers, and owners of forests and lakes and valleys. I respect the heck out of their attitude, their reverence for the places that they watch over. I don't have anything that special. I stumbled into this. I'll tell you that story if you're patient. And while I'd rather die than be impolite to something really ancient and fey, sometimes in cities what you're actually dealing with is a vomit nymph or a minor cocaine spirit that's occasionally hard to take seriously. But I'm lucky. I tend not to need specific rules. Of course, there are places like the bridge that you must not walk under if your voice doesn't echo, and Arthur's Seat has its fair share of terrifying things. But for the most part, I'm only really concerned by the universal rules, the ones that pretty much apply anywhere, whether it be an ancient haunted cathedral or the most mundane cafe. If you're hurrying home between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., don't look behind you. Make sure your bed has your head further from the door than your feet, and ensure at least one side, preferably two, is against a wall. If you're walking past a room and see a person out of the corner of your eye, but when you check again it's just an outfit and a coat hanger, don't freak out. But always make sure to check again. And break at least one solemn promise before about mid-February of each year. Close your closet door firmly before sleeping. It's okay if it cracks open so long as it's too narrow for a finger. Stay under your blanket when you sleep. Having a leg out of the blanket is okay, but don't position your feet where they could be seen from under your bed. The windows can slide upwards or open outwards, but must never, ever open inwards. If you feel the intense sensation that something is watching you from the window, ideally close the curtains. You can look from your bed or couch, but never go over to the window and look down, and never ever press your face against the glass. Only certain people are safe to sleep in complete darkness. You'll know instinctively if you're one of the ones who needs to keep a light on or a window open. Don't sleep with someone until you've had at least 3 dates. They can't maintain a good consistent mimic for more than 2 evenings, so after 3 you're safe. On midwinter morning, whichever date you personally celebrate is your winter festival, ensure there's at least one sock in your home that has no pair. There's more, but I don't need to tell you them. See, the universal rules have become a part of us now. Either they're in our biology, things that we've known from birth without needing to be taught them, or they're aspects of culture that get most people to obey them without knowing why they're doing it. Some of them, I think, aren't actually universal. For instance, I think the rule that you must offer tea, specifically tea to strangers in your home, is only on this island. The creatures that demand it only really live here. I think some of the rules are culturally dependent, because of course an arbitrary calendar day isn't actually how most non-humans count New Year. It's about the rhythms of your life and the points in those rhythms where certain things might pay attention to you. Edinburgh doesn't really have many rules that you wouldn't get elsewhere, not rules that apply to all of it. You get some hecking specific rules if you're working in certain parts of the castle at 3 a.m., but really it's just a matter of common sense. It's a very old city, an important city. Scotland is an old, wild country and it remembers all sorts of things. It's a beautiful city with so many layers to it and so many ghosts. There are things here that you wouldn't imagine, but you don't have to tap on anything 7 times. And if you order a kebab from the man with a tattoo of a swarm of wasps after taking the last train from Glasgow, look, you didn't know how bad a decision that was, but you well knew that it was a bad idea. At this point, you're probably wondering who I am. I certainly don't have any official position. I don't own any land here. I'm not descended from anyone and I'm not trained as police or anything. Actually, no human picked me. It seemed random. The night after I moved here almost 16 years ago, I had the most fantastically vivid dream. I was dancing with the most beautiful woman that I've ever seen. She had flame red hair and wore a tattered copper dress. She danced with a sword in each hand, but I was unafraid. She moved with such clarity of intent, and she inspired me so much with her grace that I was able to fluidly move around her in perfect timing, and the blades never touched me. I had never danced in my life, and I can't dance when I'm awake, but she moved me. That's all I can explain. I was awoken by a knocking at my door. It was the same woman. "I admit after our dance, I'm feeling a little famished," she said. I invited her in for eggs and bacon. In hindsight, that was stupid. Most magic runs on rules and rituals and the laws of thresholds. Home sanctity and hospitality are some of the oldest of all. There's plenty of things out there which only need an invite in your home to destroy you. But I'm glad that I did. She didn't touch the eggs and bacon, but she told me that it was a kind and respectful offer. The first thing that she told me was about Waverly. Well, no, actually the first thing she told me was that I needed to get a new coffee machine because my old one was going to break in about 5 more coffees. The second thing that she told me was that, before getting on a train to Sterling, I should check if there's a stop at Silvery. There is no Silvery on the line to Sterling, at least not unless I'm at the station. I've checked with friends who've confirmed this. It's only there when I am, as far as I know. It's safe for me to get off at Silvery. I have an invitation. It is not safe for you, and you shouldn't try. I saw a teenager try it once, and another man who was probably just counting stops to his normal one, and didn't look up from his phone as he got off. That's another one of those stories that you can ask me for. Anyway, my day job is in an office and I do things with spreadsheets. It's just, in my spare time, I'm one of the people who helps with the rules. There's actually a fair few of us, with as many people and other beings as there are in a big city, but I don't know the others. And I'm writing all of this because apparently some people don't know all the rules. They just didn't get it somehow. Their parents didn't teach them, or their instincts are all wrong. So I figured that I should write something that explains them. Some of them are obvious. You sure know why your closet door must never be wide enough cracked open for a long gray finger to curl out from inside and wrap itself slowly around the door. If you don't, please just imagine your reaction were you to see that. Congrats, now you know. As some of them you think you learned better about, but you didn't. Adults know it's safe to put your feet in the cracks between the paving stones, but that doesn't mean that children are wrong about it being dangerous. The edgelings only take small and tender victims, but some are counterintuitive. George, a local nurse and one of the other part-time guardians, called me up yesterday. That was the call that prompted this post. He told me about an awfully weird occurrence at the hospital. Apparently, an elderly patient reported waking up at around 3 a.m., drenched in sweat, hearing nothing but perfect silence. She looked at the door and in walked a sort of, I hesitate to call it a man. Apparently it had arms that were far too long and dragged on the floor, only a gaping hole where its eyes should be, and a torso that wrapped around in spirals like a knotted rope. The man stopped in the doorway, breathing heavily, and then reached out with one hand. It seemed like his feet couldn't pass the doorway apparently, but his hands could. Walking his fingers across the floor, then eventually taking a deep breath and supporting the full weight of that awfully long arm, he groped along the beds of the ward until he made it to hers. When he touched her feet, his hands weren't cold. They were warm, slimy, a little suctiony. Something told her to remain perfectly still, not to react and not to give any sign of life. The moist, heavy fingers explored her toes a little, lifted her heel and then dropped her foot. The long-armed creature sighed heavily. "No tasty eyes here," it whined. "Need tasty eyes." It took a deep breath, coughed up some slime, and whimpered like a child begging for ice cream. "Delicious eyes." And then it left. Apparently the doctors think that the woman's crazy. There is absolutely no sign of the creature on the hospital CCTV. No slime where it supposedly coughed. But George is the nurse that helps old people get cleaned up, and he says that her feet were, well, sticky. in a way that turned his stomach, and George's stomach is strong enough to clean pus out of the guy who decided to stick his thing up the open surgical wounds in his own arm, and then laugh about it over a pint. George mentioned that he's glad his patient was sleeping with her head and her eyes away from the door and her feet towards it. He made sure that it's hospital policy to ask all patients to sleep that way. I thought that it might be valuable to let you all know. I'll be back with more stories of the work that people like George and I do, longer ones too, since I won't have to give all this context, and perhaps some more explanations of the rules that you already know. When I wrote yesterday about never sleeping with your head towards the door, I admit that I was honestly a little overwhelmed by all the comments and positive responses. I'm glad that I've helped so many people stay informed and stay safe. Though I hope I haven't scared you off of Edinburgh. It's a beautiful city. A lot of you mentioned the rules about spaces behind you. Don't look in mirrors in dark rooms. Don't look over your shoulders at what might be following you. Don't rush or act afraid when you sense something behind you, and so on. So I thought that I would write something about those rules to help explain and to help deter the few of you who think you'll go around glaring defiantly behind you as if you can prove me wrong. You know that you can't do that. You know how strong that instinct is, that you shouldn't look, and you know that nobody told you. You got it from somewhere deep within you. It's convenient because this also is the story of how I met George. I'm just going to be honest with you, out late at night, mildly tipsy, buying a deep fry at a Mars bar. For those of you who don't live in regions where this exquisite cuisine is possible, you're just going to have to believe me that it's good. It just is. Moving on. I left with my battered prize and was about to sink my teeth in when I saw him. A young man, dark-haired, coat turned up against the cold. I approved of the coat and his sensible woven scarf. I saw him throw a look over his shoulder as he passed. I didn't approve of that so much. And then I saw that his shadow became ever so slightly larger. Crap. I knew about the thing behind you even back then. I wouldn't have been allowed to do this job without at least some preparation. But I had never seen it hunt in real time before. Never been the bystander as it got started. If I called to the young man, would that make him look again? If I followed him, that definitely wouldn't help. God, I didn't know him, but I couldn't just let this happen. I made a snap decision and I broke into a sprint. I would circle around the hill and meet him on the other end of the street. It had been raining and my feet slipped a little over the cobblestones, the cold air rushing into my ears for an instant headache. I needed to be in front of this guy. I saw him again as he hurried around a corner and threw another anxious glance behind him. "You've got to stop doing that," I called out. The dude looked at me like I was crazy, glanced at me, glanced behind him and then back at me. "Are you talking to me?" A pipe was dripping water into the gutter at the corner of the square. Each droplet stood out to me in the darkness. Tiny pearls glided by reflected lamplight. I don't know what George was hearing, but I could tell the rhythm of that drip wasn't entirely natural. It just seemed off. "Yeah, and I need you to stop looking behind you." After a moment's thought, I added, "Because there's nothing behind you." The shadow shrank just a little bit. I hadn't practiced this, I had never done this before, and my facial expression must have given it away, and the young man noticed. His shadow grew, and this time it wasn't a subtle difference. It wasn't one of those imperceptible differences that you can only pick up on if you're me. It looked like somebody was shining a torch right under his feet to cast a shadow that big. The shadow loomed up on the crescent behind George, broken up by the shapes of Edinburgh's typical tall windows and cut off just at the neck by the dark tiles of the roofs. "You're looking behind me," he accused, but he didn't turn around. That was good, I approved of that. Sensible scarf boy might have forgotten the rules, but at least he could see it once I reminded him. I made a series of rapid plans in my head, all discarded. It was imperative that he calm down. It was absolutely imperative that he didn't look behind him. I needed him not to see that shadow at all costs. I would have been more than happy to blind him, but I wasn't entirely sure how to achieve that from a distance with the 2 pens, keys, and a phone in my pockets, and I sure as heck wasn't chancing a wrestling match. Trying somehow to look as though I was both non-threatening and a total professional, I skipped the last few steps to the dark-haired man, grabbed his arm, and started down the street. I was almost surprised when he complied, but then I looked over at him. Now that I was closer, I could see the tears in his eyes. "You know what's behind me," the man accused in a whisper. "I do," I admitted, "and it feeds on fear, so I need you to stop thinking about that. I want you to think about the fact that I'm taking you to a safe place. I want you to think about, deep-fried Mars bars." I realized as I said it that I still had the thing in my hands, and I offered him a bite. He accepted, trembling. "I would like you to focus on telling me your name and what you would like to make for breakfast tomorrow." We were walking briskly, and I had a grip on his forearm that was a little too hard. I shifted it to his shoulder. The thing behind him was substantial enough now that it was casting its own shadow. I prayed he didn't notice. I couldn't make out much from the shadow, but it looked like it had a pretty long knife. "George," was all that he offered in response. I suppose that is fair given how terrified he was. "Okay, George, we're going to. Screw it, my place is too far. We're just going to pop into the library, that's a couple of streets over." There were 3 sets of footsteps on the cobblestones. I hurried mine along, wanting to make sure that George didn't notice. I kept up a patter of completely meaningless talk. The thing behind George's knife got longer. The relief when I saw the light spilling from the front door of my local library absolutely drenched me. I kept a steady, brisk pace up to the front door, shoved George inside, and shut the door behind us. It was only a glass door. It wouldn't hold. I drew George further into the library, found a chair that I could position in the corner, and made sure that he had his back to 2 walls before we relaxed. Both of us were breathing hard in the sudden quiet. "That was one of the other that you just handled for me, wasn't it?" I froze, and George wasn't supposed to be asking about that. Why would he know about that? "It's okay," he reassured me. "I'm a guardian too, just I kind of inherited it, and I don't know what I'm doing yet." And so I told him the rules. Not to ever look behind him if he's on a dark street like that. If it's targeted you once, you're more vulnerable. I told him how it progresses. At first, it's your shadow. If you don't believe in it, it's not strong enough to do much or to hurt you. But when you glance behind you and perhaps you see a leaf stirring in the wind or an oddly shaped shadow, it lends just a little credibility to the idea that maybe there could be, or could have been, something there. And that little bit of belief is enough to give it power. Still, not enough power to hurt you. Still, not enough to take physical form even. But enough perhaps to change the way a water pipe drips or nudge the air to blow a little differently. You think that you hear something behind you, so you look over your shoulder again. That little bit of extra belief still won't give it physical form, but it can nudge things. It could make the air feel warmer on your neck. It could make the street seem quiet. Too quiet. It could lengthen your shadow so that if you turn around and glance at it, something might seem off. You believe something is off, that something is dangerous. Perhaps you believe a little bit that there might be something behind you. It gets stronger. I told him all of this before realizing that I had made a terrible mistake. Have you ever read or told a story that scared you so hard that your eyes watered from the sheer mental strain of it all? Like your fear was leaking in liquid form from the nearest outlet. I had made sure that George had his back to a wall. I hadn't done the same for myself, and my tears were blurring my vision. I wiped them away and noticed George was a little more scared than I had expected from simply hearing about a monster, at least from a guardian. "Is there something behind me?" I asked in the most measured, calm voice that I could possibly summon. "Absolutely not." A book fell on my head. "There is definitely nothing behind you." I could feel the breath on my neck just as I had mentioned. I wish that I hadn't used that example. I hate breath on my neck. "Please, look at me." I think in hindsight, George's nurse training kicked in. I looked at him, trying to actually stop scanning the empty library aisle for anything to help, and I looked at him, right into his eyes. He has chocolate brown eyes. "There is absolutely nothing behind you. There never has been. You are safe. You are completely safe." I stood up. "There's one last thing you can try in an emergency. It works best if you trust somebody with your life. But George was all that I had." I walked towards him, took his hands, and pulled him up. I almost slipped his hands out of mine, and they were so sweaty. "Would you prove that there's nothing behind me for me?" I asked, knowing how crappy it was for me to ask. "Could we stand back to back?" The ordinary nurse, who never wanted any of this, looked over my shoulder. He visibly flinched. I felt the sensation of somebody behind me slipping a knife around, poised in front of my throat. George closed his eyes and rapidly took 2 steps past me, directly into whatever was behind me, but there was no sound. I felt his back pressed against mine, trembling. There was no knife against my throat. I reached behind him and held his hands, and we stood like that for a while, breathing in tune, hearts thudding like rabbits, knowing the only things behind us were small or harmless enough for the other to face them for a stranger. Anyway, that's how I met George. Of course, I couldn't stop it. The thing behind me got its prey that night, though it wasn't either of us. I saw her that Sunday afternoon, a woman hurrying past on a half-empty street who looked like she had been thrown out with the trash and not combed her hair since. She was stumbling a little, wearing office clothes, looking like she was late for getting fired. Sleep deprivation was absolutely etched into her face, far too wrinkled for the age that she looked like she should be. She didn't even look up or notice us as she stumbled past. She had probably learned by then, looking the way the tiredness had made her. People who heard her pleas for help would assume that she was crazy, a homeless beggar or an addict. I knew better, but I also knew better than to try to save her at this point. Right as she almost disappeared from view, she threw a glance over her shoulder. And just as she did, another woman rounded the corner, coming the same way that she had come, so they barely glimpsed each other before the first woman disappeared from view. Younger looking, prettier since she wasn't a wreck, better dressed. You would never notice that she looked exactly like the first woman. She walked with the most perfectly measured, patient step. And when I blinked again, she was gone. I check obituaries always in coroner's notes and crime reports. Officially, this woman died of some kind of mental illness or overdose. She went crazy, that's for certain. That's good. You're supposed to go crazy when you're sufficiently sleep deprived. It's one of the oldest defenses that we have. It prevents you from being completely sure that the thing behind you is what kills you. So don't glance behind you when you're hurrying home late at night. You already know this rule. You know it for a reason. I'm doing my best to keep you safe. It was risky to write this and risky to make you believe a little more, so you better have followed all the instructions. Sleep with one side of your bed against the wall. Tell your friends that they shouldn't be glancing over their shoulders, because it'll only make them more scared. And if you get up to use the bathroom and you're still feeling anxious from reading this, don't look in the mirror. Anyway, let me know which of the other rules that you might like me to explain. None of you asked to know about this rule, Everyone's all interested in what's under your bed and what's in your mirrors and why you need to run up the basement stairs. Well, sorry, first, there's one that I've realized I just need to get off my chest. So if there are any kids reading, don't step on the cracks. Writing this has been overwhelming. So many people asking for help with specific situations which sorry I can't give. You would have to speak to me in person. How exactly to communicate with guardians, it varies. There isn't really a system, just a patchwork. If there is nobody who knows how to keep the peace between humans and the others in a particular area, either humans will stop living there or somebody will end up doing the job. Whether they inherit it, learn it, or are appointed, or are even cursed with it. So if you need help, the methods vary. Some of us are, I'm not gonna lie to you, kinda crap. Those folks just sort of wander the streets waiting for the supernatural to bump into them so that they can sternly tell it off. There's others who have artifacts or helpers to detect signs of folks in need. And no, we do not all have a group chat. I've just met a few of us over the years. I'm afraid that I'm not the people-oriented type. I know where the bad guys are, but I just try to handle them in priority order, depending on how risky they are. I don't actually know if they're currently endangering anyone specific, unless I literally see something crash through your window. Even what I've got, I'm lucky to have. I'm only human, but I'm also a dancer, and my dancing partner is quite special. I know when people have broken rules, important rules, because the dark things will tell me. Last night, for instance, they whispered a name to me. Somebody who looked out of her window at precisely the wrong time and seen something that she shouldn't. Something that didn't like to be seen. They told me that her life was forfeit, and I agreed that I wouldn't try to save her, because letting them take the ones who offend them is why they leave the rest of us alone. I maybe could have found out where she lived, gone over, somehow persuaded her to salt every window and threshold, and gotten her to wear silver on both of her wrists and any fingers that she wanted to keep. But I have limits. I'm always so busy over the holiday period anyway, so I let her go. By now I'm used to letting people go, but the story that I want to tell you all is an old story, from when I was new to all of this. I was fanatical at first, you see. I thought that this guardian thing made me invincible. So when the wanted posters went up for a little girl named Bryony, the daughter of a friend who had helped me move, I didn't care if she was kidnapped by a human or personally picked out for slaughter by the Grey herself. I wanted her back. So I took the train to Sterling and I got off at Silvery. It doesn't look like a normal train station, so don't worry. You are unlikely to get off there by accident unless you're really not paying attention. And I mean it makes an effort. There's a gray concrete platform, a little red brick station house with neat wooden rain shelters painted navy blue, a big sign in the same shade of blue that announces its name in the right sort of font. But it's deserted even in rush hour. The trees beyond the platform are too tall and thick to see what's beyond them, and there are cats everywhere. And well, it's too nice. Even in Scotland, public funding doesn't cover lampposts encrusted with emeralds, a wrought iron fence shaped like interlinked flowers, and a little fountain. Anyway, I got off and waited until the train disappeared beyond the horizon, and then I knelt by the fountain and thoroughly scrubbed my hands, my face, and removing my shoes and my feet. My exit from the station was barred by a smiling young man with the most fabulously shiny hair. Why, hello there. It's a lovely day to meet somebody of such a fine sort. May I just check if you're sure you intend to enter here? If you're lost, I'd be more than happy to help you home. And it is a fantastic day to be greeted so kindly by such a proper young gentleman. I do so very much appreciate your offer to help, but please don't worry about me at all. I have an invitation here. The Fae nodded his head perfectly politely and stepped elegantly aside to let me pass. In the trees, the station was swallowed up behind me very quickly. It didn't take more than a few minutes' walk before I started seeing signs of other inhabitants. All of them were lovely. The perfect, graceful deer who bounded and leaped over the shining green ferns. The sweet little multicolored lanterns hung in the trees to mark the path. The flute music echoing from somewhere above me. The children who played in a clearing with their pet dogs and pet human, bright-eyed and golden-haired. I paused to watch as a sweet little Fae girl pet the human's hair, ripped his arm off cleanly and threw it clear across the clearing, calling, "Fetch!" I blinked for a moment as my mind processed that, but no, of course, that was lovely. They were only playing, so lovely. Like the lovely dancers twirling on a huge oak branch above me, and the lovely flowers growing on the path, and the lovely laughter of the children as they watched the human stumble in tears after his limbs. Everything in the Seelie Court is polite, and lovely and sweet. The medal that I was looking for showed itself to me, after I had been wandering for perhaps half an hour. A crowd was gathered around a string quartet playing music in a key that I couldn't identify. I've never been able to identify it, no matter how many times I've been back, and I eventually figured it out. No matter what notes they play, what sharps or flats, what sevenths and fourths, what chords of 13 notes at once, everything simply sounds lovely. My dancing partner wasn't there, so I couldn't dance. I can never dance well without her, and to dance badly would risk being rude. I waited on the edge of the field and watched the most perfect butt that I had ever seen show off in the most wonderful ballet outfit. What? I'm a human, big deal. There was a rustling behind me in the leaves. I turned and instinctively knelt. Ah, it's the little sea-eyed one from Edinburgh. Cooed a friendly voice. A finger lifted my chin and I was staring up at emerald skin. A perfect strong jaw, mossy hair longer than I could follow, kind eyes and velvet lips. Did you bring gifts? Mutely, I reached into my pocket and offered up a little silver necklace that I picked up at the charity shop. It didn't matter that it was cheap, it was old. Oh, lovely. Why don't you stand? I hesitated. Sometimes this is a trap. Simply because I wouldn't want to give any insult. A laugh. Rise, I give my permission. I know what you're here for, I don't think you want it though. And getting to my feet was easy. I sprung up, full of energy and joy. I just need to know where she is. I don't think that she did anything wrong, I want her to be safe. And I'm willing to pay. The meadow seemed to get a little darker. I noticed a few people looking at me with strained smiles far too wide. But of course, I hurriedly added, only if that wouldn't be any trouble. I would hate to bother you with my petty human affairs. Those eyes studied me for a long time before the Fae concluded. You're very lucky she likes you. My smile and thanks came easy. I was lucky. The fairy led me into the woods underneath the trees. They enveloped me again within moments, and only moments later, I realized that I was being taken out of the Seelie Court. The darkness flowed thick as oil between the flimsy branches, and the path was slick with rotting and fallen leaves. We walked into a tunnel formed by an arch of holly over our heads. No, brambles and blackberries. Wait, was that woven roots? Before long it was stone. I looked up overwhelmed and saw a vast opening in the sky, a sheer cliff of blinding brightness. Its neat edges stood in stark contrast to the crumbling mud walls. I was confronted by a slender, whip-like serpentine humanoid with coiling blades for limbs and staring yellow eyes. It was a creature that I now know to call an edgeling. It leaned deeply into me, almost touching my neck as it sniffed around my shoulder. "Ah, yes," it sniffed. I looked behind me. My fairy guide had melted back into the woods. The edgeling's long, thread-like tongue touched my shoulder and I startled backwards into the wall. "I just want Bryony," I told the edgeling. It snickered, spat, and turned away from me. "Huh, are you sure?" I drew myself up to my full height, straightened my shoulders, and thought of the look of fire in my dancing partner's eyes. I remembered the minor demon that I had fought off the week before, thought of Bryony's mother's grief, and stiffened my spine. "I'm the guardian of Old Edinburgh, and I'm speaking to you on behalf of humans. You just can't take little children. Yes, I want her back, or my friends will hear about it." I snapped as I stared him down. I woke up back in my bed. That wasn't too strange. Sometimes leaving Silvery is a little strange. I've ended up in far worse places, so I figured it was a good sign. I had been listened to and respected, and so I went about my day. I was cleaning the kitchen when I got a knock at my door. I went to answer it, but there was nobody there, just you. A long, thin strip of meat curled up on my doorstep. Some kind of offering from some variety of murdery ghost cat. I had no real idea the limits of what I might be dealing with back then. I decided to leave it where it was for now until I figured out what to do, and I shut the door. No sooner had I shut it that there was another knock. Confused, I swung around and opened the door again. Nothing stared me in the face. I looked down and there was another long, thin strip of bloody meat. I ignored them when they knocked the third time. Just kept on cleaning my windows and doing my dishes. After I got started on cleaning my carpet, the knocking got insistent. I went to look again, this time just through my keyhole. The pile of meat had grown alarmingly, but nothing seemed dangerous, and so I opened the door. The curled up pieces had been straightened out. The puddle of blood was growing, but not alarmingly. This was not fresh meat, but something near the end looked like a foot almost, a shredded one. Sickened, I closed the door, put noise-canceling headphones on, and did a day's worth of spreadsheets on my laptop. I almost managed to forget about the knocking until I realized that I had no milk and I would need to stop out if I wanted a cup of tea. When I opened my door again, though, I threw up. They had reassembled Bryony on my doorstep like a jigsaw, each slice the width of a human-height steak. The moist pieces slid apart from one another, so despite her skin being perfectly preserved, I could see in the gaps into her brain, her lungs, and the neatly cracked bones of her thighs. I realized rather swiftly that I should get this inside. The police don't necessarily need to know about the supernatural, and I didn't fancy explaining the corpse to them. I managed to get the stuff. I just refused to think of it as the actual corpse of some poor kid, onto a plastic sheet in my kitchen, though a few pieces slid out and unthreaded themselves from the mess, slapping softly onto my carpet. Why the heck did I have white carpet? Why was that a thought in my mind anyway? I felt awful. I felt responsible. My mind decided to start counting the specks in the glass of my kitchen window rather than feel those things. One more knock, almost so soft that I didn't hear it. I wasn't sure if it was real, but I went to the door. I just felt compelled to. Outside, it was a slice through a person, just a tattered diagonal slash. Half a pupil, half an eyelash, a centimeter of twitching lip. A few hairs that sprouted from the top and hung down to cover the exposed brain matter. A fascinating slice of chest with a tiny bit of heart tissue expanding in and out behind the skin, pumping blood that leaked down its skin to nowhere. A single toe. She was alive. She hopped towards me, but then it was too much to keep her balance. She seemed to find it easier to slither. I reached down my arm and she curled around it. lifting that single eye like a snake so that she could look into mine. "I'm so sorry," I told her. I broke down sobbing. "I'm so sorry, I have no idea. I'm just sorry, I'm so sorry." I think she caught sight of the pile in my kitchen because she stiffened at my arm. I quickly moved into my lounge. After sitting with her and simply weeping for what felt like forever, I realized that I should ask her, "Does it hurt?" The eyes stared into mine. A single teardrop fell. I learned my lesson, gentle reader. I knew that I had to let her go. And so I broke her neck. Judge me if you want to. You can even hate me for it if you want to. Just don't step on the cracks. I'm back. Yeah, I took a short break for a little while. To tell you the truth, I wasn't exactly writing for a huge audience here, you know. Being a guardian is lonely sometimes, and I was up at like 3 a.m. and I had the sudden urge to write some educational stuff for you. And suddenly I got hundreds of people being all, "How do I stop myself from getting murdered by horrible monsters?" And wow, it's a lot of pressure on top of my day job. The only reason that I wrote this all down in the first place was because I reckoned that nobody would read it at all. Yeah, and my name is Furin. Furinish is an old joke amongst my friends that we're only similar to ourselves. Like I'm a furin-shaped human, or a furinish or a furin-like, but the true furin would be too powerful to behold. Personally, I think it's hilarious, but I understand if you want to punch me a little. So yeah, I took some time off. But I still want to help, and lots of you guys seem to want to know the story behind the mirrors. See, you've all got the primal instinct. It's a good instinct. Nobody ever told you that you mustn't look in a mirror when it's late at night, and you go to the bathroom in the dark. Nobody ever said, "Hey, that's dangerous because of spooky supernatural stuff." And you might not have believed them if they did. But you know, without needing to be told, you've evolved that fear. So you want to know why it's understandable, I guess. Let me tell you about Alicia Craig. Alicia's mother called me. When she opened the door, she opened it just a crack, so that I could barely see the nerves etched on her face. "Are you the guard?" she whispered pointlessly. I should add, since anything worth being scared of can hear your whispers just fine. "Guardian," I corrected. "I'm a guardian, yes. You lit a candle in your window, I heard about it, so I'm here." She opened the door a little more but was still blocking it enough that I couldn't come in. It's my daughter. We're all a little afraid of her, but you won't. She's not dangerous or... I'm not going to hurt her," I told her in my most reassuring leader promise kind of voice. I didn't actually use the word promise. She let me in. The apartment, like many in Edinburgh, was accessible from a winding unlit stone staircase. It was a relief to be in the warm golden light of the hallway. I closed the door behind me and spent a brief moment admiring the brightly colored creatures on the walls. They were brilliantly lifelike paintings, each depicting an animal. A fox, a hare, a stag poised to leap away into the shadows of a forest. The backgrounds were sketched in roughly blotchy watercolor, the loose hand of a truly confident artist, but the animals themselves were done with a lover's attention to detail. "Harry does those." Alicia's mother had noticed me looking. "Her brother, he's away at university." "Doing zoology?" I asked, admiring the layered feathers on the robin beside the door. "Biology, but yeah, he likes the animals. Do you want a cup of tea or something?" "That'd be lovely. And then I'll need to meet Alicia." I was hurried through into a similarly decorated kitchen. The Craigs had a large collection of mismatched mugs, sort of like my own. I like those little moments where you see someone else living just like you and it reminds you that you're still human, you know. I need those sometimes. My tea came in an oversized red mug with curved sides, perfect for warming both of my hands. It had dots and a green leafy pattern at the rim, like it was pretending to be a giant strawberry. I was so caught up admiring it that I almost didn't see Alicia. Can I have a cup of tea?" she asked plaintively. Her mother, who had just sat down with her own mug of tea, sighed and got back up. While Alicia's mother made tea, I studied the girl. She seemed normal enough. Bright eyes, brown hair, freckles, a creased school uniform. She flopped down in one of the kitchen chairs and then returned my stare. I don't know what she was looking at. I'm pretty sure that I appeared normal enough. I don't go around wearing cloaks or anything stupid, not unless I'm going LARPing. I still really haven't figured out my style since I switched genders and all, but at the time I was going through a phase of wearing long dark coats and jumper vests because I thought that it made me look gentlemanly. In hindsight, it made me look like a butch secondary school English teacher, but you know, we live and we learn. Those bright eyes studied me, and after a little while I began to get comfortable under their gaze. "Is this the guard you talked about, Mom? The one that can help me with my nightmares?" "Guardian," I corrected wearily. I could already tell you that it was going to get really tired of that. "Yes," Alicia's mother glanced at me. "You can fix that, right? I don't know, I've never had a guard or a guardian before. I don't know you all even existed, and a month ago I wouldn't have believed it. I just..." "How did you hear about me?" I inquired, always curious to know where I'm getting my business from. "Librarian," Alicia replied before her mother could answer. "I asked my librarian. Mom didn't want to call you at first, but I set a candle in the window at a high risk-reward ratio because it wouldn't really hurt us if you didn't come by. And if you did, then it would prove something supernatural was happening." I raised an eyebrow. Alicia didn't look old enough to be saying things like risk-reward ratio. "I see you well, Alicia. Can I ask you a few questions?" Alicia nodded. "First of all, can you tell me what's been happening?" "I get really mad sometimes," Alicia told me matter-of-factly. She seemed quite calm. "Like really mad, it doesn't feel good. And when I feel really mad, sometimes people get sick. Mom had food poisoning for a week after she made me eat some broccoli. I didn't mean to do anything." I nodded and took that in. That description could mean any number of things. "Okay, Alicia, thank you for telling me. Can I ask you something else?" She nodded. The bright eyes were still studying me carefully. "The world has lots of dangerous things in it, but usually humans have lots of natural defenses too. Like how the kitchen has a dangerous fire in it that your mom uses to cook, but you wouldn't really touch the fire because it'd be hot and painful, so you would pull your hand away. That instinct keeps you safe. You know what I mean?" Alicia nodded. I decided to trust that she understood. Kids are usually smarter than you think they are. Our instincts keep us safe from the supernatural too. Like how you imagine that thing running alongside your car, and you play that game where you don't step on any cracks, and you feel safer if your bed is against the wall. And did you do anything against those rules recently?" Alicia hesitated and then crossed her arms. I hurriedly added, "You're not in trouble if you did. Sometimes people get to feeling brave and experimental, and they want to see what happens. I just need to know so that I can fix it." She paused, fidgeted, and then relented. "I looked in the bathroom mirror when it was really dark. It was scary, and I wanted to understand why it was scary. I thought that it was brave." Brave is such a stupid way of saying stupid. It's a dumb word. "Can I take a look at the mirror?" I asked. Alicia's mom got up in response and guided me down the hallway to the bathroom. "It's not just the anger," she told me in a whisper as soon as we had left the room. "She changes a bit. She doesn't remember doing it." I looked down at the phone that I was offered and flipped through a few pictures. Alicia's face had twisted with something dark and awful, a grin far too wide and eyes a little too large, screaming at something behind the camera. A cat torn to pieces, a post-it note left on the fridge reading, "It's too late." The mirror in the bathroom was just a mirror. I turned the lights on and then smiled at it experimentally. My own face smiled back with my own sea green eyes and poorly taken care of teeth. There was a hint of flame around my hair, a sign of my dancing partner, but of course Alicia's mother couldn't see that. She hovered behind me nervously. I returned to the kitchen table, projecting calm as strongly as I could. Nobody needed to know that seeing the cat bothered me. "So, what's up? Can you help her?" Of course, I settled myself back down and finished my tea. Mirrors are important to our souls. They're not doors to an alternate dimension or whatever else you've heard, at least not unless it's a rather special mirror. But the act of recognizing yourself, of thinking that, "Ah yes, that's me. I'm a being who thinks," that's what creates and reinforces the self. Mirrors can rather directly facilitate that process. So do other things that help us recognize ourselves. Reading back through your old diaries, for instance, or even doing those stupid "which Disney princess are you" quizzes online, if you get a vaguely accurate answer. That doesn't help Alicia. Alicia's mother seemed significantly more anxious and impatient than Alicia herself. I'm getting to that. There are beings that would like to slip in always, possession, but usually humans are quite hard to possess, because we know who we are and what we want, and it's hard for something to take over without some kind of foothold. And distorted reflections can give them that foothold. You think you recognize yourself, you accept the reflection as yourself, but it isn't you. Hiding in the shadowy parts, there is something that you're not looking at, and it's not something that you want to invite into yourself. Clean mirrors in well-lit rooms are the safest. So I need to move the mirror. Well, yes, and I rummaged around in the bag that I brought for a moment. Possession's an easy fix since it's frowned upon by few laws and human morality, so it's much easier to get help without offending anyone. You've caught it at an early enough stage that some fairly minor positive spirits ought to be able to handle things. I'll just give you some stuff that attracts the helpful kind of beings and we'll let them handle it. A lavender circle around Alicia's bed. Here's a silver ring. Here's a token to leave on an open windowsill. And do you have a pen? Here's the lyrics for a summoning song. A tune doesn't matter. I handed over the things and packed up my bag and drank another cup of tea and made small talk for 5 minutes. I remember feeling pretty good about it all. I had done my job as a guardian and it hadn't been hard. They had been reasonably friendly and I got 2 cups of tea out of the bargain. I went and handled other things, spreadsheets at work, a date. Not with George, y'all need to stop shipping us, it's weird. And a few chalk lines in back alleys that needed a quick refresh. I came back 2 days later just to check in and Alicia answered the door. I had just come from work and it was winter in Edinburgh, so it was dark and my fingers were freezing. "Hey Alicia," I greeted her brightly. "Feeling much better?" "Much. Can I speak to your mother?" Alicia let me in without a word. I walked in and I looked around and then poked my head in the kitchen. No sign of Alicia's mother. "Hey, where is she?" I called out to Alicia. There was an audible click as Alicia shut the door behind me. "She's in her room," the girl told me. I walked along the hallway to the door that Alicia indicated, and then hesitated and took a step left in the bathroom instead. There it was in the mirror, a tiny crack right in the corner. How could I not have noticed it before? And running along a few of the corner lines of the bath and in a tiny groove at the edge of the mirror, mold, the black kind that appears when you don't clean the bathroom enough. That was very, very bad. I had a sinking feeling that something awful might have happened to the positive spirits that the Craigs had summoned. I emerged back into the hallway. The child at the other end of the hallway, framed in the light of the kitchen, wasn't Alicia. In the shadows, I could see where her face had twisted, where her grin wasn't a child's grin, where her skin cracked and fragmented into shadows. The thing took one step forward and I bolted into Alicia's mother's room and slammed the door behind me. Alicia's mother wasn't herself either. She had been rearranged. Her nerves were laid out in lines and rows across the walls, her blood vessels a tangle on the bed, her intestines strung out across the desk. Something had been curious about how humans were put together, I supposed. Mold had overtaken the room. Black was splashed all over the folded skin, the urine-soaked bed linen, the carpet, and the desk. Some sort of rot had set into the intestines, with the half-digested contents showing through the rotted-away sections. The heart was pulsing slowly around the two colored kids' pencils that impaled it on the desk. Scribbles and doodles covered the walls next to the nerves strung up there. A tiny sheep with a pink balloon was depicted in crayon and mold next to the brown-black dried splatter that I suspected must have once been a kidney. I took one step forward and a lung squelched beneath my foot, and the entire room shuddered and made the most awful noise that I had ever heard. And I had the awful, awful realization that Alicia's mother might still be alive. The doorknob behind me turned. I didn't hesitate. I just sprinted. I made it to the window and I flung myself out and not even caring about what might happen when I hit the ground. I'm not proud of abandoning that woman there and I never even learned her name, but I am proud that I'm alive. I broke an ankle, but George patched me up later. It's useful having a friend who's a nurse. I don't know what Alicia is now. Some things are above my pay grade. I'm a guardian, I keep the peace, but stuff that possesses you, it wasn't a part of the peace in the first place. I don't have to negotiate. I don't have to arrange for humans to keep out of other people's space in exchange for other beings to not kill us. The Fae want that stuff exterminated just as much as we do. I let that kind of thing be handled by, well, people that can afford to even contemplate being in that room when that door opened. I still have nightmares about it. Anyway, that's why you don't look in mirrors when it's dark. Please, for the love of all the gods, that there's a reason why that terrifies you. Listen to that instinct. Don't make me break any more ankles, please. If this post gets even one of you to avoid that kind of fate, it's worth me being awake at 8 a.m. to post this. Hit me up in the comments if you want any more explanations. Oh, and I mostly tweet about my day job in gaming. I have a life outside of being a guardian, but feel free to follow me on Twitter. You already know the rules. Please follow them.